Hello and welcome to this video for COMP3218, Game Design and Development at the University of Southampton. Today we are going to be looking at some of the games that our students have made for their second coursework. My name is Tom Blount, I lecture on the course, and I'm joined here today by...
Charles Hutchins. I'm one of the student demonstrators.
Brilliant. Charles, could you tell us a little bit about what we asked the students to do for this coursework?
Sure. So they were asked to write a small game prototype with a narrative and game engine element, and specifically we're kind of looking for a game that they can give us where the story impacts the game and where the game impacts the story. We'll be looking at some of those today.
Brilliant. All right, let's jump into the first game. All right, and this game is Tiny Tactics. So we've got a really nice, title screen here. We've got settings, so we can change the volume. We've even got credits, which is always really, really nice to see. And we've got a really nice sort of thematic backdrop and some music. So let's jump straight into it. Hello, Bjorn. We've been searching for a while now, and there's still no sign of anything remotely dangerous. Maybe the report was wrong. I bet it was just a bear or something that gave him the spooks. Okay, hello, Eric. From the looks of it, this is the area mentioned in the report. I doubt the monsters would have moved far from here. It's Carly. So we're getting sort of a nice introduction to each of the... I'm assuming these are like the main characters. True, but he's got a point. How many years has it been? Marissa. So that's kind of nice. Each of them gets sort of one or two lines, and the way they say things maybe gives us a little bit of initial insight into what their characters are like. So here, for example, like Carly's already saying, and we've barely seen any action. Okay, and I assume we're the captain, if you like, then. Something up ahead. Oh no, slimes! I was expecting it to be rats. That's the typical first level encounter, right? There we go. We can take care of these, start the journey back home, and once the paperwork's all done, the pub is waiting. I like Bjorn. The staff there probably think you're alcoholics. We could play cards or something at the captain's house. After we mop up here, I guess we can talk alternative victory celebrations. Okay, so there's quite a bit of text leading into that. But there we go. We've even got an integrated tutorial, so it's always good to see when people take on board some of the things they learned from the first coursework as well. Okay, blue tile to move. Enemies on red tiles can be attacked. Click this to end turn. Right click to deselect units, so I can't do it yet. And I can use escape to pause. So I don't actually get to try those controls out before moving on, but that's okay. Move all units to finish your turn. There we go, now I can use the camera. Ooh, the camera moves really smoothly as well, that's really nice. So Bjorn wants to charge straight in there, and again we get another bit of line that not only gives us an idea of his personality, but I guess his sort of like mechanics, which is really nice. So he wants to charge right in, he's got strong armor. So if I click you, okay, Marissa's an archer and nervous, so we'll move you towards this ledge. Carly is also a ranged character, so we're going to move you up these steps, I guess. And then lastly we've got Eric, who wants to look after Bjorn and can move quite fast. So if I right click you, yeah, it deselects. That's really nicely done. So that's our turn. Now the enemies are going to move. Okay, they leap forwards a bit. I guess there's the players don't have sort of movement animation either, which speeds up the process a bit. Click on an enemy to see its attack range, so it can attack anything within this range. So Bjorn currently about to get slimed, and then I guess. Okay, so I don't right click to deselect the slime, but presumably I can just. Oh, that's nice actually. So it keeps the attack range up as I've got Bjorn selected, so I know who I can attack. And this is. So I'm guessing this was at full health, so this must be how much damage it's about to take. And then I can wait or attack. So I wonder if I just stood here, would I be able to attack both of them at once, or would I have to just pick one? I have to just pick one. Okay, that makes more sense. Let's get the captain into the action, although I don't think he's going to be able to get there straight away. I've forgotten your name already. I'm going to call you Other Bjorn. Oh no, you're Eric, aren't you? There we go. Okie dokie. And then the ranged characters will move you up as far as you can go, but not quite far enough. And we'll move you up as far as you can go, but also not quite far enough. Oh god, there's more of them. Let's just do a quick looky around. Okay, so it doesn't look like there's much else in this area, so this is just the tutorial level if you'd like. So Bjorn, actually we're going to move up here and attack this one. Eric also going to move up, help Bjorn. You know what, actually I can probably finish this one off, so I'll do that, and then that'll give some of the ranged characters something to attack. So... you can actually move up here. So that's a bit of a shame. It asked us to sort of move up to this ledge, but I don't actually have the range to get to them, which is, I guess, not necessarily a bug, but maybe a little bit of an oversight. But maybe it's just, if I'd have moved my character sort of closer to this ledge, it would have drawn them a bit over. So let's see what happens now. They're going to move back up here, yeah. Well, we can't quite finish them off yet, but... wait, no. There we go. So I have to click on the tile I'm on before I attack to sort of say that I'm not going to move, which makes sense. Yeah, you can't do it, so I'm just going to end turn straight away. So we've got some arrows up here as well. I'm not sure what they're for. Let's try clicking on them. So we have our objectives. And we've got like an overview of our team as well. So that's like a really nice bit of UI polish. There we go. That's the last of them. Excellent instruction as always, Captain. Didn't even break a sweat. So we're heading back to town now. It's getting a little bit dark, maybe we should make camp. So I'm going to skip over some of this dialogue so I'm not just endlessly reading bits out, but if you're watching this on YouTube, you can pause it and get the whole gist of it. Now that we're all set up for the night, how's about a toast to the 5 of us? And somebody has arrived. A messenger. So we're out on a special mission, but we've gotten a letter from the commander of the army. The situation to the east has escalated. The army of the undead has risen to take the capital, led by 3 powerful generals. Their presence now threatens every corner of the continent. We are drafted immediately, and we have to go east to find some enemy scouts. Defeat them, report back. Conscription is mandatory. Okie dokie. So Marissa not happy, Carly surprisingly happy, Bjorn also pretty happy. Okie doke. Units now have a confidence level which is currently at 100%. A unit's confidence will decrease when they're attacked. Their confidence is also affected by the captain's choices. If their confidence drops too low, they might desert. View unit stats using the menu available from the top right. There we go. That's where it's explained. And we can also click on our units in the camp to talk to them. So Eric has an exclamation mark above his head, so I imagine they want to chat, but let's have a quick talk to the others. Okay, so that's kind of nice. Some like sort of inter-battle dialogue where we can, again, sort of get a sense of characterizing our companions. Eric's got a favour to ask. Bjorn's a bit too eager. Eric wants to keep him safe. So we've got to make sure he doesn't get too hurt. So this is kind of nice. So we can effectively take on an extra objective for some bonuses with the potential of some penalties if we fail. So because there's, a bunch of numbers being thrown around, you might think that this is like a calculation rather than a choice. but because of the way it's set up, it's more a choice about how we want to play. Like, there's not necessarily a right answer. We could accept it or deny it. One isn't strictly better than the other. It's all about whether we think we can achieve it and whether we want to possibly risk everyone else for the sake of getting these numbers, which I think is a really nice way of that makes it quite an interesting choice. Bjorn's got 30 health. That's probably fine. Cool. So we rest, everyone get... okay, so we don't fully heal between missions. We only get a little bit back. Okay, so while we're going through this, shall we take a quick look at the mark scheme, starting with the quality side of things?
So we say that most key information is shown, or all key information is shown? I think we've got actually quite a lot of information, especially with that bar that on the top right that you mentioned in the tutorial that you clicked on. That's a lot of good information, and I think that also drives the story part of this game, doesn't it? So I'd say that's probably quite well. Yeah, quite well done.
So yeah, for information design, sort of how they present the various information. So we have, so we've got, for example, our movement, our attack range. If I deselect you and have a look over here, we've got the health bars. We've got even just the mouse cursor. We've got the range of the different enemies. We've got the range of the other enemies. Like you say, we've got the different panels over here that show us quite a lot of information, actually. So everyone's attack, everyone's defense, everyone's... I assume this is confidence, and I assume this line is their breaking point. Which I am making an assumption there. I don't know why their breaking point isn't 0%. Maybe their breaking point can change depending on what choices we make.
Yeah.
And then we've also got the objectives as well, which is really nice. So yeah, in terms of information, all of the information is... I can't think of any information that's missing. Can you? Maybe sort of, the attack strength of the enemies, but maybe that is a thing that is useful to hide mechanically, and that we have to sort of intuit from, their sprites rather than sort of being given direct, explicit numbers. Also, I don't know if you noticed while I was sort of clicking through the dialogue, but we've sort of been given an explicit choice here. So, also, I guess an implicit choice. If we go, so our mission is to go and attack these scouts, and we've spotted a really, really scary enemy general. And if we just complete our mission, then we can do that quite easily, but the general will probably escape. Or we can decide to go and fight the general instead. So again, sort of like a nice diegetic choice rather than just a big dialogue pop-up. Like the other one was, this one's actually a choice that we make sort of through play, which we'll come to later. But yeah, in terms of information design, I can't think of anything that's missing. Can you?
No. So we're going to say, is it at the stage where it's kind of novel? I'm not quite sure. I'm just trying to give a sort of a scale sort of thing. Maybe an excellent for...
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a particularly novel, but it is so sort of complete and polished that I would say it's sort of verging towards praiseworthy. So perhaps even between an excellent and a praiseworthy.
Shall we continue with the mark scheme, or do you want to?
Let's.
Would you like to finish this one first?
So next on the mark scheme is sort of graphics, so the overall graphical style. Again, we're not marking the graphics themselves, but the way in which they're sort of used and combined. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Very good. I like you said about the indication of where you can move, like you are now with the blue and the red squares. That's quite useful and looks nice. And it's another point to say that it's effective and consistent. I would say it's pretty consistent. Also, the fact that
even just the highlighting on who's still able to act. That's more an information design thing, really. But in terms of like the graphics, like, you know, the sprites are all really, really consistently used. Everything is like these nice, really clear, sort of blocky colors. Like even like, you know, like the animation of the river is like super, super simple, but so effective as a result. Like it doesn't like hugely distract, but we can tell, you know, that it's like a fast-flowing river really, really easily. So graphics-wise, I would say, you know, definitely consistent, definitely effective, and I would certainly say appealing.
Yeah.
Now the question is, do we think they are what we would call thematically resonant? So, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm some. Probably say they are.
Yeah, it's all like, again, they're all sort of, you know, very similar and consistent style, but even elements like the UI and things are all sort of like matching. So, like, they've made sure to keep the same sort of font across all the different bits of UI, over here and over here. Like, you know, there are probably little bits and pieces they could do. So instead of this being, you know, just a white, like white background, make it, you know, sort of like faded, sort of papery kind of texture. But even that would be quite difficult to do in pixel art. So perhaps between an excellent and a prizeworthy, because I think they're a very, very good graphics, and it's sort of a testament to what you can do with, you know, like so like some of the assets that are out there by just sort of adding your own sort of layers of UI in the same style. Okay, and lastly, audio. So because I'm streaming this, Charles, you actually can't hear it, but there is actually a lot of really nice audio. There are some attack sounds. There's a very sort of, what's the word? Like the enemy has their own attack sounds. There's like an oof every time a character's hit. There's some nice background music that I've had to turn down a little bit just so we can talk all over it. But yeah, again, it's really, really well put together. I'll turn it up just a little bit actually, so as we're talking about it. Like the music's sort of very like fitting. It's sort of you know, sort of ominous and heroic, and sort of like very sort of, you know, like quite typical RPG battle music. But as a result, again, really, really fitting. So again, complementary, appealing use of effects and music. Again, I'm not sure it reaches all the way up to the prizeworthy. For that, we'd need sort of like sophisticated use of things. So, for example, like an adaptive soundtrack that changes based on, I don't know, for example, the health of our characters or something like that. And I haven't noticed it changing particularly, but that's something that we'll keep an ear out for and maybe come back to. But for now, I would say the audio is definitely up at the excellent.
Yeah, I think does it change when you're in sort of like combat or anything like that? Or...
So I think there's different music for every scene. We'll take a look at that when we get back to the camp. But yeah, in which case, perhaps again, sort of between excellent and prizeworthy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's thinking back to the information design. That might be something that would be quite useful. So the enemy's sort of intent. So the enemy could attack anyone in this, but which of the three is it going to go for? And I remember speaking to them in the expo that we held for this, that there is like some amount of AI where the enemies will sort of try and prioritize targets based on certain factors. I don't remember what those factors were, and it's not really sort of revealed through the game. So that would be something that would maybe be nice, particularly because, you know, my objective is to save Bjorn, or rather, you know, minimize damage to Bjorn. It would be good to know who's going to get hit next, or sort of, or at the very least, how the AI is going to sort of try and, like, is it going to target the person doing the most damage? Is it going to target the person with the most hit points? Is it going to target the person with the least hit points? That kind of thing.
So, mechanics. Should we move on to that?
Yes, let's. Meaningful play, the first of which is mechanics. So, what are the mechanics that we've got? Oh, I forgot to use somebody to attack. Whoops. Eric's not having a good day. So, we've got sort of typical sort of turn-based movement. So we've got sort of movement radiuses, we've got attack radiuses, we've got different enemies that do different, or different characters that do different amounts of sort of damage, have different amounts of defense, we have a sort of confidence or morale meter that's affected by various decisions throughout the game. We've got sort of intermediate sort of what do you call them? Camp sort of like dialogue dialogue moments when we're back at base. We have different objectives, and if we go for one, another will close off and things like that. So a lot of different mechanics sort of working together. There's, as with most things, like there's always room to add a few more. But I think they're doing a lot with what they've got.
So I'd probably say it hits the complementary mechanics, but possibly not a wide set. It would have been probably nice to have more. Oh, you say to the contrary?
No, sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought first, and then I'll chime.
No, I was just going to say that because like your options are to attack with the enemy, and I know every character has a certain attack that they can do, but maybe more. I don't know. Maybe you could have different mechanics per character that you could choose, and maybe that could also influence the game or the setting. Like you could have an AOE based attack rather than just a kind of point attack, and that would have different advantages in different situations. Maybe with lots of enemies of very low health, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So the typical way you would add more mechanics or something like this is you can attack, or I don't know, heavy attack, or use a potion, or that kind of a thing. That said, I think they do have a number of different mechanics that they're using, so I think it probably is a wide set, but perhaps not a wide set of complex mechanics, which would still put them at the excellent.
Okay, yeah.
You can't do anything from there. I'm putting Bjorn into harm's way. But yeah. So again, partly because it's a small prototype that we're going for. So this is a problem I'm going to run into a lot, I think, where I'm trying to play and talk at the same time. So because it's a small prototype, you don't want to just keep piling up lots and lots and lots and lots of different mechanics. You ideally want a set of mechanics that you can use in interesting combinations to produce that kind of complexity. So yeah, I think I would say they're probably an excellent for this.
Also, as part of, I think, this coursework, what's quite useful is that they actually give us a storyboard or a flowchart of what's kind of happening in each scene. So it's quite interesting that I've got the flow chart in front of me, and then I'm watching you play it, which is quite interesting. So I'm trying to track you through that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did mess up a little bit there because the red outline was over this, so I thought, oh, if I stand here I can still attack, but no, that was, if I'd moved up a bit I would be able to attack that spot. So there is a little bit of difficulty that I'm having, sort of trying to work out, if I go here, will I be able to hit still? I think I will. Let's go here, and then so I can kill one, and then hopefully I can get the other, and Eric will be fine and Bjorn will still be on max health. Anyway, that takes us on to controls. Ouch, that was quite painful. Oh god, there's still one left. So jumping straight in at, say, a good, that would be a reasonable set of smooth, usable controls. Excellent would be the same but intuitive controls. I think they're mostly there. There are a couple of things that I keep sort of not quite managed. So for example, I tend to sort of click on somebody and then try and attack, and it selects the what's the word? It selects the enemy rather than attacking them, because first I have to effectively forfeit my movement and then attack. But otherwise, pretty much everything works exactly as I would expect it to. Except, so again, this is sort of some of the information that I was talking about. Can I hit this one from here if I move here? So maybe that would be another thing sort of to add nicely for the to really bump up the information design. Sort of have your sort of blue radius, and then as you mouse over it, it highlights the the red radius of where you'd be able to attack.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've already forgotten which bit we're on. Control still. Yeah, so I would say maybe between a good and an excellent for this. Yeah, there again. So I mismoved because I wasn't quite sure if I'd be able to attack there. Ooh. And they teleported back. Not sure how that happened.
Well, actually, quite a good time. We're now on to bugs in the mark scheme.
Ah, we are indeed. So, a good, again, would be the game is reasonably complex, but there are infrequent minor bugs. I'm not quite sure what happened there. I genuinely don't know if that's a bug or if I clicked something. That might be a minor bug. An excellent would be the game is reasonably complex and there are no obvious bugs. And I think we're probably there. We'll see if it comes up again. Mission complete, one less scout camp. It was more difficult than usual missions, but thanks to the captain, we got it. And we even defeated the general, which Carly's really, really pleased about. Gets a morale boost. So does Bjorn. But, there we go. So Marissa and presumably Eric are both upset that we put people into harm's way, perhaps unnecessarily. So it feels like one of these games where whatever decision we make, two people are going to be pleased about it and two people are going to be displeased by it. Which is, again, it sort of makes it a bit more interesting. It's not like certain games that have moral choice systems where you might as well make the one choice at the beginning and then always carry that through. You have to sort of effectively balance those decisions. So it almost becomes a calculation because you presumably want to maximize, how many people you've got around. But it's sort of the way in which you make those choices and whether you can sort of... So for example there, I did something that would cause two people to lose morale. So can I keep them happy enough or alive enough that... Or rather, if I put them in harm's way as well as that, then they're going to lose even more morale. So it sort of, again, sort of plays into, okay, now I know that this is a consequence of what I've done, that's going to affect the way that I then play, which I think is kind of nice. There was a little bit of dialogue there saying, hey, we all made it out in one piece. Presumably that would have changed if we hadn't. Oh, good, we got another messenger. Should you make it, there'll be more medals. Brilliant, I love medals. Yeah, so in terms of bugs, I think we said it's pretty complex and there aren't any obvious bugs. We'll come back to that if we spot any sort of again. But yeah, moving on to sort of the overall brief and the story engine.
Yeah, so we've got a number of examples of where the game world impacts the story in important ways. That's at the good level. Examples of a game.
So in terms of the game affecting the story, I think that was actually an example we spotted just there. So for example, because of actions we took in the gameplay, we made sure that everyone stayed alive, and that was reflected in sort of the dialogue with the NPCs. And like I say, presumably, if we'd have let somebody die, that dialogue would have changed. So that's sort of an impact it's having. It's not necessarily the most major example of it, but it's a good example of sort of that relationship there. And there we go this time. Everyone's actually quite hurt, or, well, you two are quite hurt. The rest of us are fine. You presumably have a quest for me. So yeah, like you say, a good would be a number of examples where the game world impacts the story in important ways. So you have access to their game notes, which is a little sort of couple of paragraphs that talk about some of the ways they manage this. Have they mentioned anything sort of particular about it that we've not spotted as we're playing?
I think we've got everything. I'll just do a quick read now. Oh yeah, so one of them is the choice between defeating generals or saving the people. And I think that might come in a later mission.
Oh, yeah. I made a special point about that when we saw it and then totally forgot. So I'm glad we checked. So yeah, so absolutely that is a gameplay decision that does have a major impact on the story.
one of them being confidence levels, but we've already kind of covered that. Also affects the ending that you receive, which is quite interesting. And if I go back to the flowchart that they gave me, I'm wondering what kind of. It looks like we have 2 different endings, aside from the unit disbanding. Oh no, sorry, I apologise. 3. So we also have a betrayal ending.
Ooh.
Which fits in, I suppose, with the fable.
Okay, so I guess we'll come back to that a bit more when we're looking at agency and sort of the richness of the structure. For now, story engine still. So an excellent would be a consistent interplay between the game world and the story, including important impacts. From the sounds of it, I'm not sure we're quite there with the consistency. So there are, I don't know, but they might be sort of verging on it. Presumably, each mission is. Let's jump straight into the next one. I don't have to hypothesize. From what we've seen so far, I'm assuming that each mission is going to have some sort of choice like that. In which case, yeah, probably is relatively consistent, although some of the choices seem to be more impactful than others. Here we go. So yeah, general or... so this is interesting. So this time it's not ourselves we're risking, it's the villagers effectively we're risking. We don't want to... Do we want to kill the general or do we want to save the villagers? And again, this... So again, we'll come back to this when we're talking about agency, but that's kind of nice. Again, it's not a... it's less of a calculation. Like the first one could be... The first one also wasn't a calculation, but let's pretend it is. It's a case of, do I think that I can defeat both of these sets of bosses and live? Whereas this one is almost a moral choice. It's, do we let the bad guy get away to save the innocents, or do we let them perish and go after the bad guy? So yeah, interesting. The first choice was more sort of mechanically weighted. The second choice seems more narratively weighted, which is really, really interesting. I guess with the added sort of consequences of our the mechanics of our companion's confidence. And Eric raises an interesting point that I hadn't even thought about. We could, of course, try and do both at once. And we've only got 15 turns to do it. Okay, I imagine I'm going to struggle at this, so let's take a pause for a minute to go back to this. So yeah, in terms of game world to story, I think we're probably between a good and an excellent here. The question I've got is, does it go the other way? Are there certain story choices that impact the game? And I guess, is it a case of, accepting those sort of promises in dialogue? I guess that's our story then affecting the game, because it's going to affect the numbers going forwards. So it's affecting sort of, our the overall confidence level of our troops because of like a promise we made. So if we keep the promise, they go up, and if we break the promise, it goes down. It doesn't necessarily have an impact on the way we're playing, or it doesn't affect the underlying mechanics of the way we're playing. It affects how we as the player are thinking about them and trying to interact with them, but it doesn't actually change the game mechanics themselves.
Yeah, and I suppose it means that you're more tactical. So if you do notice that there's someone at a lower confidence, then you would play it more defensively. But then again, that is more gameplay, isn't it? But then I suppose the confidence scores are also impacted by the choices that you make in the game. So I don't know.
So this is what so it's definitely having an impact on the way we're playing the game. It's not affecting the mechanics themselves, but it's affecting how we interact with them. So for example, if we got somebody to super high confidence level and they got a special ability or something like that, that would be a really, really mechanical impact. So if we look at good, that would be a number of examples where the story impacts the game world in important ways. And again, excellent would be the consistency there. And it feels like, I think we're still at the good. Tell you what, let's send one ranged and one not ranged each direction.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because Eric's not feeling too great, I'm going to send the captain this way. this may not go great. Yeah. So what are your thoughts on that?
Not sure. I don't know. I can't really see one where the gameplay, the story influences the gameplay so much. I don't know.
It's interesting. It calls the one that as easily felled as the third general. I assume that means we're going 3, 2, 1. But it feels a little weird because it's the first general that we've killed. But no, I think, like, you know, that sort of story choice, that choice we made in dialogue about sort of, you know, making a promise to another character, that's definitely a sort of a story choice. But yeah, the thing is that it's the way the story evolves, I don't think is having necessarily mechanical impacts on it. So, for example, another sort of example of this could be if we let all of these villagers get killed, and then in the next fight we have, I don't know, less supplies or something like that, or if we let the general live, the enemies are stronger or better trained or better equipped or something like that. And I don't know if that's something that happens. Again, like if they say so in their game notes, let me know.
They don't. I was just looking at that. One of them, they've got a paragraph on how it affects the wider narrative. So how it affects the decisions that you make affect the gameplay at the final level. And they also talk about a confidence level and about how it falls, and how that has an effect on the gameplay going forward. So yeah, maybe like a good for that.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so
yeah.
now we move on to agency and sort of choices and the branching structure. So first thing on agency, like I say, is that structure. So yeah, there's definitely a number of different branching points. So for example, in the first mission, we can choose to attack the general or let them get away. Same here, presumably the same in the third mission. And there's also the sort of the narrative sort of some extra sort of I guess narrative choices which you can sort of call branches in the between mission parts as well, where we're making those promises or not. So I mean, an excellent is a number of branching points throughout the game. Prizeworthy would be a network of branches and pass through the story, and I don't know if we're quite up there, because again, there's not that sort of like mechanically interlinking of, you know, the choices and the way they're sort of being tracked and things being ongoing. But I think there's definitely a number of different branching points that have an impact on the story.
Yeah, I suppose it's only tracked really through confidence scores, isn't it? I suppose not actually. Well, I mean, with any other, it's not a network in a story sense of the story in that kind of way, is it? I suppose. Well,
you have their story graph, so you can say for sure. I can just see what I've got here at the minute.
Oh yeah, that's what it looks like from that graph. Yeah. Yeah. So I probably I agree. Yeah, I think it's not. I wouldn't say it was possibly a network.
Okay.
But a number of branches, yes.
Oh dear. So things are not going well. So I've broken a promise to Marissa, and Eric is dead. I guess we'll see how that affects things. Okay, so that would still be an excellent for structure though. And choices. So we've already talked quite a little bit about the choices here. And about sort of how they're actually, pretty interesting. So again, let's look straight at an excellent. So that would be interesting choices, an effective system for managing player agency. And I think we're probably there again. So like some of the choices, you know, quite mechanically focused, some of them quite narratively focused, some of them quite mixing. There's that sort of management of agency in the first mission where if we go for the scouts first, then the general escapes. there's also, you know, the very sort of like explicit choices in the camp moments, and then the sort of more diegetic choices within the level itself that sort of are determined by sort of which path we take, by the time limit and things like that. So yeah, I think that's probably an excellent again.
Yeah.
I probably should have moved you first, but oh well. And that takes us on to the overall sort of design elements. So how they tell the story, how the sort of theme of the story is carried over from the theme of the story that they're trying to tell is carried over sort of through the gameplay and mechanics. So first off, poetics. So do they mention which of the 3 fables that we asked them to base their story on that they have chosen?
So just reading, they haven't made it completely clear which fable they've chosen. According to the notes, anyway.
So I did speak to them in the expo, but I don't remember what they said. So I don't think it's the eagle and the tortoise, which is about sort of, you know, be careful what you wish for kind of a thing. I suspect it's the I've forgotten the name of it, the bear and the 2 travellers, which is all about, you know, sort of stressful circumstances, sort of showing, you know, true friendships and sort of whether or not you would stab your friend in the back to escape from a bear kind of a thing. It gives me that kind of vibe.
Yeah, me too.
And it's kind of interesting. Oh, no, I've lost another one. Stressful situations indeed. So yeah, the premise...
Is there a turn count? Just thought about that.
Sorry, go ahead.
You know what turn you're on?
I know between turns what turn I'm on.
Oh, right, okay.
So if we... There we go, 7 turns left, but you're right, that's...
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't actually have to kill the general, I could have just gone through this way and it would have been fine. It's fine. This is all fine.
I think in the next scene we might get the failure ending because we have less. Do we have less than 3 units alive?
Oh no, Eric is dead, but he's also sad that I broke a promise to him.
Oh no, we have exactly 3 units alive. Okay, cool. Right, so we're not going to get a unit disbanding.
Okay, good.
End.
I guess arguably a bug that Eric is annoyed at us that we've broken a promise from beyond the grave, but maybe he's just unconscious. I'm not actually sure how that's meant to be acting. There we go. Sweet.
Yeah.
But presumably now we actually have to reach the exit in the time limit. Anyway, I'm getting distracted by gameplay again rather than marking this. So in terms of poetics, I'm pretty sure it's the Traveller and the 2 Bears. The premise, or like the setup and the framing of their story is quite distinct from that, but the fact that we're able to sort of ascertain that that's probably the one they're going for means that there's at least some of the theme carrying through, right? Friendships, stressful situations, that kind of thing. How much of that is carried through in the mechanics? And I would say actually a fair bit, right? Because we effectively have that decision to make. Do we sacrifice one of our friends in order to... Because if we die, game over, right? But we can let everyone else die to make sure that we live.
Yes.
There we go. So the dialogue definitely changes based on what happened, because it explicitly names the characters that didn't make it, and what optional objectives we managed to defeat as well.
Okay, so we've got another commander letter.
Okay. So I think we might have to sort of take another look at the bugs thing and maybe just move that between good and excellent, because we have spotted a couple of bugs now, but very, very minor ones.
Yes.
And in terms of story, yeah, there definitely seems to be those links that we were talking about earlier, which is great. Anyway, Distracted again, poetics. So an excellent would be the narrative and the gameplay support one another as the mechanics emphasize the themes of the story. And I think we're really, really there. In fact, we might even be almost at a prizeworthy for this. So the narrative and the gameplay reinforce one another as elements of the story are conveyed through the experience of play. And I think I don't know if we're fully there, because there are, like, it feels very much a case of, like, if I made all the right choices, I could probably get through it, and if I wasn't trying to mark this and play it at the same time, I'd probably be doing a little bit better. It doesn't feel like there are moments where, I have to sacrifice somebody for that. But again, maybe that's tying into the overall theme. So I think a lot of the poetics and the theme and the sort of the moral of this fable that they're getting across are really well represented with the mechanics. So I think probably between an excellent and a prizeworthy. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Yeah.
Okay, which means next on the list is techniques. So how have they told the story? So the first one being pacing. So how is the sense of drama and the story sort of unfolding? So I mean I'm going to click through some of this and have a look at the. Okay, Carly wants to just kill a bunch of people. Okay, sure, fine. I probably should have spoken to Bjorn to see how he's feeling. So we've got. So story-wise, the missions are relatively similar. There are some enemies. There is always a general. The sort of narrative stakes don't rise hugely because, like the messenger shows up and tells us, what the situation is, and then the situation basically remains the same. It's not like, the final mission is the enemy are about to storm the gates of, the White City if we're going for Lord of the Rings kind of a thing. Like that real sort of upping of the stakes. But there is definitely ascendant pacing. Certainly, like mechanically, the levels are getting a little bit harder as we go. I guess there's this kind of inherent raising of the narrative stakes that we're probably going to lose at least one companion by the time we get to this point. Is there a clear final peak? So again, I may not be able to get to the end of this because I'm trying to mark and play at the same time. Do they mention anything in their sort of story graph about sort of what the final battle is supposed to look like? Is this the final battle, or is it a case of like there's a boss fight after this?
I think it's a boss fight after this. Yeah, because I think there's apparently after. I think we're on mission 5, which puts us. So after this play, if units are left due to low confidence and there are now less than 3 units alive, then we have a betrayal ending and we don't get to the final mission. If we don't have that, then we do get to the final mission, and there are 2 choices in the final mission. One being if all 3 generals are defeated, and one if we don't defeat all 3 generals.
Okay. So it sounds like there is definitely sort of a final climax. So we're probably at the good side of things. So there is some ascendant pacing with a clear final peak. They're almost actually, no, I think it was like part way to the excellent, because they do have that, those narrative lulls. So we have sort of the combat, and then we have a moment where there's sort of conversations between the NPCs. They discuss what's happened. It sets up the next mission. So actually, they do actually have that kind of rising and falling structure that is quite nice to see.
And obviously, with a choice, we always get a choice when we go back to camp, don't we?
Yeah.
And I suppose that sort of like help us, and like you say, kind of with pacing, it kind of quietens down a little bit then, which is quite good. And depending on your situation, you either accept or reject that offer. So, yeah. So we're sort of saying prizeworthy, I suppose, for pacing.
See, I don't think they're quite at the prizeworthy, because of what I was talking about earlier. The peaks don't feel like they're rising a huge amount above one another. Like the sort of like there's definitely rising and falling, but there's I guess not the upping of dramatic stakes that I would expect for something sort of in the prize-worthy category. But I think you're right. I think it still probably does hit the excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's annoying. I can't attack diagonally. Oh, what does that make? I guess that makes me a rook rather than a bishop. Okay, and
so you go on to techniques.
Yeah, so this is how they're actually sort of telling the story. So we've got we've obviously got a lot of sort of dialogue that's telling the story. I think that's sort of the main way they're conveying sort of the story elements. Do we have anything else? Do we have anything like, for example, cutscenes?
Would you argue that going back to camp is a cutscene? Probably not really, is it?
No, I'd say that's just more dialogue is the thing. It's like a different setting for it, but it's... So I'm arguably we have, we start in medias res, right? We start in the forest fighting some slimes. But other than that, I think it's primarily the sort of dialogue between. So we have, I guess, sort of the dialogue sort of. I don't know what you call them. Dialogue set pieces, if you like, where we're sort of stopping and having a conversation, and then we also have like the dialogue barks sort of in combat, where if we fail a condition, a character will say something. But I think I would be inclined to put this sort of where are we? Like mostly on the good, maybe sort of between a good and an excellent for this one.
And our final category is feedback. So this is where we gave them feedback during a lab session, and this is sort of how we assess if they've taken that feedback on, basically.
Yeah, so it's all about how they've responded to it, whether they've interpreted it in an interesting way, and how successful those changes have been made. So what did they say about the feedback that they were given?
So their feedback was that with mission sections and cutscenes, make sure your story isn't being told solely through cutscenes, which is interesting that they've had that. So they've obviously, I suppose, taken that on, because I don't see many cutscenes where we don't have choices or there isn't some element of gameplay.
Hang on, here we go. Here's, I guess, like our epilogue cutscene, if you like. Okay, so
all right.
Maybe could have had a few more. What's the word? I guess firstly a slight visual bug in that cutscene, but also maybe could have incorporated a few more sort of visual elements to convey what they were conveying with the text. But again, a slightly different way of conveying story than just the dialogue. So I'm happy to sort of put them between the good and excellent there. Going back to the feedback. Sorry, what were you saying?
So I was saying about cutscenes. They were saying about make sure your story isn't being told solely through cutscenes, and we're just discussing that there's not really any cutscenes, is there? In this,
well, I guess they're sort of talking about this as a cutscene. I guess I would call it more sort of, or maybe that's what they were worried about, that would be considered just cutscene. I don't know. So how they addressed that was some units will become more depressed if the other units are dead, or if their preferred objective was not completed. Okay, so that's sort of the dialogue barks that I was mentioning, where if a promise is broken, like they'll mention something in combat. Or I guess like it changes the dialogue in their camp. But I mean, you can definitely still have like cutscenes that adapt to events that are happening, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But okay, I guess I get what they're saying with that. For the did they mention any other bits of feedback?
Yeah, so I got two more. Make sure saving people / not saving people ties into the fable. And I think they just implemented more of a confidence loss into that. And then another bit was make sure it's clear to the player what choices they have and what efforts those choices will have.
That might mean to say effects.
Introduced. So yeah, those last two bits of feedback, I think, kind of prompted them to produce this kind of confidence system. It's quite interesting that this was like at the feedback stage, because it seems like the confidence system seems to be there from the start.
So from what I remember, in the feedback session, they were sort of very much at the ideation stage. So a lot of these ideas sort of were coming out as they were getting the feedback. So yeah, it does feel like it's a fundamental part of the game that they've made that came out of the feedback. Which in a way is good, because one of the things we've talked about a lot is how it's really interesting to see that sort of mechanics as metaphor kind of a thing.
Yeah. So interesting. We've got they've also said in this bit they've got an indicator mark at the 25% level on the confidence bar to show when confidence is at a critical point. Doesn't really say what this critical point actually means though.
I guess, is that the level at which they'll desert, or maybe they start fighting less effectively? Yeah, it's interesting that the critical point is at 25%. Why not just move it to 0%?
Yeah.
That might be more intuitive, but again, maybe there's a secondary effect that happens when it hits 20%, and then something really bad happens at 0%. Maybe that bit wasn't hugely clear, but in terms of adding that sort of confidence and sort of management of units and how that interacts with the story and the themes and the poetics, I think is a really interesting change and a really sort of good way of handling that. So I think they've definitely done a good job with that confidence system, and I think they've taken that feedback on board, haven't they? They've really it's not completely clear what this 25% mark thing does, but so I think in general that's a good change. So because of that, and because of what you were saying about those changes, and sort of the fact that although they tried not to tell the entire story through cutscenes, they could have sort of expanded it more into some other different kinds of techniques. I don't think it quite reaches excellent, but I think we're definitely at good, and maybe sort of between good and excellent there again. Okay, in which case that brings us to the end of this game. Let's move on to the next one. And here we have the Roadtrip. Again, nice little title screen. Nice graphics behind it. I guess we're off on a road trip. Some lovely music. Let's jump into it. Okie doke. So again, another tutorial. Maybe not learning all of the lessons from the first coursework. This is a bit of a wall of text, but we will glance over it. So we've got 4 friends off on a road trip. Each of them has a loyalty. As everyone knows, loyalty is an incredibly important part of road trips. So some decisions will make it go up, some decisions will make it go down. Some things we can only do if a character has a certain amount of loyalty. They all have very, very similar faces, so let's meet the gang. We've got Barry the Brawler. Barry's a proper bloke. He likes punching things in pubs. We've got Greg the Gambler. So again, it would be nice if some of these things were sort of more this parts of story and characterization were sort of done through the gameplay rather than just a bunch of walls of text at the start. But it's building a foundation, and we see some more of it as we go on. We've got Kevin, who is the cool one, or at least thinks he is. And we've got Dave, who is the protagonist, which means he is a completely and utterly blank slate and quite boring. So off we go. Day 1. We immediately come into a problem. What do we listen to on the radio? This is clearly a very, very important decision for any road trip. Kevin wants rock, Barry wants sports, Greg wants jazz, and Dave thinks it's probably fine if we all just chat to each other. So we're immediately given a choice, but we don't have a lot of information to go on, right? Presumably, whoever we pick, their loyalty will go up, maybe everyone else's loyalty will go down as a result. From what I remember, again from speaking to them in the expo, that is mostly the case. Although, I think if we pick Dave, we get a slightly different effect because we're not putting on a radio anyone doesn't like, so it has a slightly different effect. In fact, let's pick it and see. So the group talk throughout the day realised we don't really need the music. Nobody's especially happy, but nobody's disappointed by it either. So again, it's maybe something that we could intuit, but it's not really a signposted hugely well. Okay, so after an enjoyable day of catching up, though, the gang eventually reach a spot to set up camp. Question of food arises. So Barry wants barbecue, Kevin wants to hunt, Dave is fine with beans because Dave is a blank slate. Greg would offer to buy everyone takeout if his loyalty was above this level, which it is not, so we cannot click this one. So that's kind of a nice thing. It's put in so early that I assume it's very unlikely, or rather, I don't know if we'd have picked Greg's radio station, maybe we'd be able to pick this. But it's kind of nice that they throw this in sort of early to sort of signpost that, hey look, there are decisions that you could make that are locked behind things, even if you didn't sort of see it in the tutorial. In a way, this is quite a good tutorial of that element. I mean, if we bought sausages, I don't know why we need to go and hunt and forage, so let's go with Barry this time.
Yeah.
Barry uses his barbecue talent to barbecue some sausages. They're average, but of course, while he's still cooking, everyone tells him it's the best thing ever, so Barry is quite happy about it. But a group of animals have shown up who are trying to steal our food, so let's get in a fight. Okay, another combat tutorial. Each character gets a turn. They can attack, skill, or defend. So again, it's a fairly typical turn-based RPG combat. Attacks will deal damage to an enemy. This is our most reliable damage option. Defend causes a character to take less damage. Skills are unique to each character. So we did meet the gang, but we sort of glanced over some of their skills, so we don't know exactly what they do. And skills are locked between particular levels of loyalty. So they have, I guess, a weaker, a mediumer, and a stronger attack or skill. Some skills are able to increase loyalty by a small amount. After using them multiple times, you might see an increase. So that's kind of interesting as well, sort of encouraging certain playstyles to try and increase loyalty. If a player reaches 0, they'll take a turn to get back up, but they'll also lose loyalty. Click on one of the options to close the screen. Okay, so see Barry's skill. So Barry's got a pint on me, which I think will heal somebody else, which isn't really useful right now, but it will slightly increase somebody's loyalty. But I think we're just going to go with attack. We'll select an enemy. Barry attacks the deer, so if we hit next, the deer takes 5 damage. Dave can do a deodorant flamethrower, which I think does a small amount of damage to everything. Enemy group took 3 damage, there we go. Greg can card throw, I don't remember what this does, we'll find out. Deer takes 2 damage. I wonder if that's a randomised amount of damage, because otherwise wouldn't we just want to use attack, unless that does something to loyalty. So I guess we might as well jump into the marketing scheme, because I'm already about to say things about information design, and information design is handily top of the list of the mark scheme, so we'll jump straight into that there. I'm going to just bring the sound down a little bit, so we'll get to the sound again in a moment, but I want to make sure that everyone can hear Charles as we talk about the information design. So there's a number of different bits of information. It seems like the important one is loyalty, which is shown quite clearly. I guess in the sort of combat we've got the various different healths. It would maybe be nice to know sort of what the proportion of this is, so we know that some of our attacks do 5 damage, say. It'd be good to know what this total is, so we know whether 5 is a lot or really not a lot. I guess once we've used it, we see an impact and we sort of see, okay, that attack did quite a big proportion, so maybe the number doesn't matter too much. But having an idea of I guess the overall effectiveness would be kind of nice. Similarly, although the I use the word loosely, the tutorial told us what each of these different skills did. That's a lot of information to take in all at once before we've even, got into the game. Even if I had read that all quite thoroughly, I don't know if I would remember it by the time I got to use it, particularly because all of the skills are pretty much locked right at the start, so it would take some amount of gameplay to get through before we could use these, and I would definitely have forgotten what they did by then. So maybe, like a tooltip or something to sort of remind me what these do would have been really, really useful.
Yeah.
But that said, things like this highlighting, so we can have an idea of who we've selected, or highlighting the enemies in red, kind of nice. There we go. Dave, you're just going to punch a deer. That's what you do on.
Was it also said that there's a loyalty increase when you heal or something? Did I read that correctly, or maybe not? Because if there is, then I suppose it should be shown, shouldn't it?
Yeah, in much the same way. So we get a thing saying, dealt 5 damage here. It'd be nice if there was a big sort of number 5 appeared above a deer. It'd be great if there was a pink sort of +1 loyalty or something to sort of really hammer home the effects these things are having.
Yeah.
Used rest.
So it's sort of maybe like a good level with the information design, so all key information is shown, but maybe not shown clearly.
Yes, I think that's probably where we are. Maybe between a satisfactory and a good as well, because most of the information is shown. It's a bit of a stretch to say putting all of the important skill information in a text box at the start is showing it. It technically is, but really it should be shown here as well, I think.
Yeah.
Let's just punch this deer. And again, there are some other things, for example, when the making it a bit clearer, sort of the intent of the enemy, sort of what move they're going to use, who they're going use it on, could be useful to do. I can see why mechanically maybe you don't want to include that, but again, that's sort of a those little bits of extra polish where you have sort of a number 5 sort of floating away from somebody's head to sort of show that they've taken damage, would sort of really emphasize some of those key bits. So I think, I don't know, do you reckon between a satisfactory and a good, or at a good?
No, I'd say probably between satisfactory and a good. Yeah, like you say. I mean, I think regardless if you have a number or not above people's heads and things, even just something to say by the way, you've taken damage.
So it did have that at the top. So it did say, deer uses this attack, somebody takes 10 damage or whatever, or deer heals itself, plus 10 health or whatever. But you're right, it would be nice to connect that to the sprites and things like that to make it really obvious, because that's the bit that we're mostly looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's because even
halfway between all of good.
Yeah, I think between satisfactory and a good, because almost all of it is shown, and arguably all of it is technically shown, but really just a tooltip or something sort of reminding me what those skills did would be really, really useful. So I think between a satisfactory and a good. Graphics wise, you know what, in terms of the UI and stuff, I actually quite like it. We've got the little sort of pixely sort of faces. They're mostly they're a bit samey. It would be kind of nice if they really, really characterized them slightly different, give one of them a hat or something. And in fact, I think later on we actually do find some special items that can give so the one I remember seeing in the expo was, I think, Kevin, the cool one, gets some sunglasses, and little details like that are kind of nice. But they all have slightly different faces. It makes it easier to see sort of at a glance which one is which. That's really nice. I like the fact that for the choices that require or have a certain amount of luck attached to them. And I will also add that when I played this in the expo, I never passed one of these luck checks. So I am still convinced it's rigged, even though I was assured it's not. But yeah, the fact that they have, a dice to sort of show that it is a a choice where there is some randomness, and B, to give you an idea of the amount of randomness on each one as well. So I think it said, if the number's higher, then you're more likely to succeed, and if it's lower, you're less likely to. So I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah. It's a very simple, isn't it? It's a very simple design, and you just know exactly what it is when you look at it.
Yeah.
You know it's a dice, and you know that there's the dice you're associated with probability. It's just, I don't know, it's quite nice.
And similarly, we've got these sort of sort of pixelated photos that are sort of like standing in for the different things. So rather than worrying about drawing an entire scene in MS Paint, take a photo, pixelate it. It's not thoroughly consistent with the rest of the art style, but the fact that in fact, it puts me in mind of some of those really old FMV games. But the fact that they've run it through a filter to try and make it match the aesthetic is a really nice touch. So yeah, good would be consistent and effective graphics. Excellent would be consistent, effective, and appealing graphics. I think we're almost there. I don't know if we're quite there, because again, there's
excellent.
Yeah. But I think maybe between a good and an excellent for that.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Yeah.
I should probably make a choice. What are we doing at this golf hole? Again, so this this choice, and we're going to get back to this in a minute. I'm not sure what's going to happen if I make a choice here. Presumably, whoever I pick is going to be happy with it. But is that the only effect? Let's find. Let's pick one and see. So Kevin does a trick shot. Kevin's loyalty goes up a bit. Okay. So the group approach a pub during the evening. They decide to go in, grab some food and drinks. We're immediately hassled by some football hooligans. I imagine we're going to what's the word? Get in a bit of a rumble. So, interestingly, we've got another locked-off choice. So, did you see this one in the expo? Because I'll put this to you. What do you think would unlock this choice?
So, I think I know how it's unlocked, because I saw this in the expo too. It wasn't immediately obvious to me, but when they mentioned this, then it made sense. So, apparently this choice is unlocked when you listen to the football and the radio in the car.
Yeah, if we'd picked the sport radio, we'd be able to talk about the football match and diffuse the situation, which I think is kind of a neat thing. Again, it's one of these choices where the consequences aren't really apparent. It's a thing that almost makes the choice more interesting in retrospect. We had no idea that picking sports radio would have any impact at all. But the fact that they highlight it here, again, it's not explicitly, so you didn't notice or didn't realise what it was that locked this. I made a sort of guess in the expo, and that was kind of okay, so that's a consequence of a choice I made earlier. So although before we make the choice we don't have a huge amount of information, they are at least sort of linking back to the choices and making it a bit clearer there. So that's kind of nice. Similar.
I suppose it would have been nice as well. I suppose it's going back onto a little bit more information design, really. But it would have been nice to know why you can't have that choice. Do you know what I mean? Some sort of symbol, like we have with the dice, just saying this was unlocked in a previous, this is unlocked. Usually, not by a previous action, maybe.
Yeah, I guess. Although. So there would be a symbol if it was locked because of loyalty, and I kind of made the assumption, I guess, when I saw it that, okay, if that symbol's not there, it must have been something else I've done, so it must have been a previous choice kind of, but you're right, maybe they could have made that a bit clearer. Similarly, again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but talking about the agency and the interesting of choices, it's difficult to tell what effect any of these choices are going to have. There's some amount of things you can intuit, so Pocket Sand gives us a chance to do maybe it stuns one of them at the start of a fight, but it's a risky move. Sucker Punch starts the fight immediately, but does some amount of damage to them immediately. Or just saying high, I don't know, maybe we can avoid the fight, or maybe that's just the boring option and they immediately start at full health. It's interesting that we've got 4 choices, but I've already forgot. Is this Greg? Greg the Gambler? Is both of them, so it's somebody doesn't get a face here. I don't know if that's deliberate or not. I'm going to go with Sucker Punch. So Kevin manages to land a blow, so we've actually knocked out one of the hooligans, so we're going to be fighting fewer enemies because of that choice.
Right, okay, yeah.
Okay, so the music shifted to the battle music, so this is a perfect time to talk about audio.
So, is the audio complementary? Has the audio got complementary audio effects and music?
So there's definitely music. It definitely sort of switches between scenes to try and keep up a consistent tone, which is nice. There's a bit of a limit to like the effects, so there's like a sort of punch noise every time we do an attack.
Okay.
I'm trying to use the... I think this will stun somebody. Yeah, so there's slightly different attack noises and things like that. Used a bonk.
So we could say maybe at the satisfactory level, some audio effects and music. Would you say that they're complementary? I suppose they would be complementary.
I would say they are.
If you throw a punch, it's a punch sound.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think they could do like a bit more of it. For example, like even just like little, I forgot the name of it, but like a click when you press a button, sort of those extra bits of like sound effect to sort of give some useful feedback to the player. Because for example, if you don't see the select enemy appear there, it's not obvious that the click has taken.
Yes.
So I'd put it, maybe between satisfactory and good, or at good. What do you think?
I would probably between satisfactory and good. Oh, actually, you're the best person.
So I was going to say,
yeah,
it's
the audio.
a bit cruel to put that decision on you because you can't hear the audio. So yeah, but I think I agree with you. I think I would probably put it between a set. Actually, you know what? I think at a good, because the music is quite nice, and the fact that it changes between scenes and the battle music sort of fits the sort of battle aesthetic works. It would be nice if there were more developed effects, but otherwise, I think it's probably at a good. Okay, so moving on to meaningful play. Okay, there are healing noises as well, which is good.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
So we've got a set of complementary mechanics, or for good, or a set of consistent mechanics for satisfactory.
Ooh, so what mechanics have we got? So we've got the sort of so we've got two phases of game effectively. We've got the sort of dialogue-y, narrative-y bits where there's the loyalty aspect of things. There's sort of those linked choices and choices locking or unlocking other choices. There's the sort of battle side of things where you've got attacks and skills and defends.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what the skills would be more in this, because I remember not actually having like such an opportunity to use them when I played through in the Expo. But maybe because I just didn't play the game very well.
So when I played in the Expo, I found myself basically just spamming attack. They did say, I think, in the Expo that it's maybe a little bit unbalanced, or rather it's balanced a little bit on the easier side. Because again, that's not a terrible thing to do for prototypes, right? You want as many people to be able to see and play through it as you can. Kind of for that reason, I would almost have started everyone at medium loyalty, so you can use sort of the maximum amount of skills. And then if you play it really well, you can unlock the super skill or whatever. And if you start doing poorly, you feel the impact a bit first before your characters are all like at rock bottom.
Yeah.
One thing that I don't think is explained particularly well is I'm pretty sure if this skill doesn't work if there's only one person left, because you can effectively stun lock them, but they don't really tell you that in the game. It just says it failed.
Right, yeah.
And I can see why they've done that for balance reasons, but that's kind of when we're talking about like information design, that's probably an important thing to explain, because it's not something that everyone will intuit. I'm getting distracted again. Back to mechanics. So I think we've got a set of complementary mechanics. They could have maybe developed it a little bit wider, but the fact that they have these different skills is kind of nice.
Yes. Yeah. I can imagine that when you get to that level in the game, it would be it would be cool to use those skills, sort of thing. And the fact they've got like ones where they, like you say, when they stun everyone or when they do some sort of AOE type damage, or yeah, I think that's quite a good little addition.
Okay, in terms of controls, it's always a bit tricky to for these ones where it is sort of, you know, just click on buttons. Like, yeah, the controls are fine. It's clicking on buttons. What more do you want? And this is kind of like, it ties into sort of the like, you know, there's not necessarily a wider set of mechanics that would require a wider set of controls. So I think I would say, like, in terms of like the usability of the mechanics, yeah, they're perfectly usable. It's clicking on buttons. There's not a lot you can get wrong with that. Although that said, like, the little bit of extra feedback for when you've clicked on a button, like, you know, sort of like even things like it's part information design, part controls, right? If I sort of mouse over a button and it highlights, and then I click on it and it sort of gives me a nice sort of click as a bit of feedback, it's I'm less likely to get confused about, oh, okay, now I have to select an enemy to attack because I know that control is taken, kind of a thing. But I'd still be inclined to, you know, put it between a good and an excellent. So there's not a lot of different controls, but they're not needed and they work fine.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. In terms of bugs, so we haven't. Well, there's a bug right there, but that was terrible. Dave, we're just going to deal with that. Everyone's sad, but the wasp, we've got a wasp now. The wasp is happy. Good. We've got a pet wasp in the car. Brilliant. So it does feel like I'm getting off track again. It does feel like the balance is maybe a little bit off. The combat's a bit too easy, but managing the loyalty is a bit too difficult. Because it feels like it's really easy to lose loyalty with lots of people, but a lot harder to gain it. But maybe I'm just... Because I think... Yeah, I guess I just have to try and milk it as much as I can in the combat sections. But anyway, in terms of bugs, yeah, like, it's a reasonably complex game. Again, it's simple, but it's complex as it needs to be for this kind of prototype. So it's reasonably complex. I haven't noticed any obvious bugs as we've been playing it today. So I think we hit it on an excellent. If anything crops up, we'll revisit it. But otherwise, let's move on to how well it fulfills the brief.
So, do we have a number of examples where the game world impacts the story in important ways?
I'm going to take us on another tangent for a moment, because this is something I want to point out for when we get to agency. This is kind of the quintessential example of an uninteresting choice, because it's literally, do you go left or do you go right? Like, they take the same amount of time, but they go to a different place, and I have no idea what each place is or what will happen. So you could just effectively roll a dice here and it would have the same impact. It's not an interesting choice for me to make. So we'll talk about this a little bit in a moment.
So it doesn't increase loyalty, because I was thinking, I suppose, taking the left road to...
Oh, maybe it does, yeah.
Barry happy, be better.
So, yeah, he's a bit sad, so we'll take that. No, it didn't affect it, we just ended up at a particular place.
Oh,
okay. The biker gang is about to beat us up in a pub. So, yeah. But in terms of, you're right, talking about the story engine. So, game world to story. So, we have the fight sections. The fight sections affect loyalty, because if a character is knocked out, they lose loyalty. Some of the skills can increase loyalty if we use them repeatedly. Which then affects choices that we can make in the story sections, if you like. So, for example, Kevin, because Kevin's pretty pleased with us, we can just beam one of the bikers with a rock. I feel like I should take Barry's option, because this feels like it's the better option because it requires a loyalty check. But because Barry's so low, I kind of want Barry to kick things off, because maybe that will make him happy, but again, I don't know. Like, will that make him happy, or is that just going to start the fight? Let's find out.
Yeah. So that didn't affect anything, did it?
No, I think that just started the fight. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there are definitely some examples where the game world impacts the story. Like if we let everyone get knocked out, then it's going to cause some choices to be locked off. And also, I'm pretty sure low loyalty affects what happens to characters at the ending. So,
yeah.
So is this a number of examples, and is this important? Is, I guess, the thing. It affects the ending, so sure. I guess other than that, though, the effect is... Minor's the wrong word, but it doesn't come up a lot, right? It's only those particular choices that we see that are affected, and it doesn't affect like any of the dialogue or any of the like, you know, the what am I trying to say? Like the dialogue of our friends. So like none of that changes based on their loyalty. I think it's more that the choices affect the loyalty.
Yes.
So
yeah.
So I would say maybe this is between a satisfactory and a good, I think.
Yeah.
And then vice versa, story to game world, is kind of interesting because it's almost the same thing, right? It's again, the loyalty is the thing that's tying these two bits together, because we make choices in the story sections which affects the loyalty, and then that loyalty affects what skills we can use.
Yeah.
And again, that's maybe somewhat undermined by the fact that it's quite difficult to raise loyalty enough to use the skills, and like because of the balance, it's perhaps more effective to just keep punching people in the face.
Yeah.
But I think there's...
Also, it's got things like, you know, when we save the wasp, I think that has an effect, doesn't it, later
Yeah, I think
on?
that does change
It's
an ending as well. But that's like a story choice that's affecting the story, rather than... It's not changing the way we play the game or anything. Like,
No, it's not, no.
It's the loyalty that unlocks more skills and abilities. So I think, like, balance aside, yeah, unlocking new abilities for characters based on sort of decisions we've made or things like that. Or, for example, when we get into that first fight or the second fight with the football hooligans, the choice that we make that starts the fight determines one of the conditions of the fight. So either we knock somebody out right away, or I think they're stunned right away, or nothing. So actually, in a way, I think this might be at the good rather than between the two. I think there's more impacts from story to game world than vice versa. I think, like, I don't think it quite reaches excellent because, again, sort of like the balance is maybe a little bit off that stops it really shining, and like some of the impacts are a bit limited. But otherwise, I think that's probably a good.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we're going to be talking about agency, so sort of the structure of the story. Again, Charles, you've got their game notes. So have they got a story graph that you can sort of get an overview of the different paths through the story?
I do indeed. Yeah, I've been following it along while you've been playing to see what kind of actions you could take at some sort of point. There's like I said, the left and right option that we had does take us to two different combat scenes. We've got a number of things that we could have done earlier on, like listening to football on the radio, which determines if we go into some sort of combat or not. There are a few branching points. It seems to me that a lot of them kind of either skip combat or don't.
Yeah.
Sorry, skip combat or don't. Which I suppose is branching. There are several branching points. But it's not really a network, I would say.
Yeah, so I think this thing, you're right in that there are definitely a number of different branching points here. The downfall is that I think that they're not going to be very interesting sort of branching points, but we'll come on to that in a minute. In terms of the actual structure, yes, like for example, we can go left or we can go right, we can avoid a fight or we can have the fight. There are a number of so I think, for example, the fact that we effectively now have a pet wasp is something that comes back later on. So I think this is, again, maybe sort of between a good and an excellent. It may even actually be at an excellent. Although I guess the divergence of the branches isn't sort of like particularly what's the word? It doesn't have an enormous impact on the story. Like you say, it skips a fight or it doesn't skip a fight, or we go to. So I think maybe between a good and an excellent for this.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Yeah, between a good and excellent.
So in terms of the choices. So I've already griped about the do you want to go left or right being sort of the quintessential bad example of that kind of a choice. Some of the other choices are a bit better, right? So here, for example, the group comes across an interesting accessory. Whoever takes it gets a large boost to their loyalty. Who gets it? And this is, like a relatively interesting choice. Do we want to boost the person that has the lowest loyalty? Do we want to boost the person that has the highest loyalty to try and unlock their best ability? Like, this is definitely a choice rather than a calculation. There's not a correct answer, and it's up to us to sort of decide, do we want to like cheer poor Greg up because he's so sad, or do we want to see what Kevin's special ability is? So there are definitely some interesting choices. I think there are a number of choices that could be improved a bit by being a bit more upfront with what the potential consequences of that choice are. But the fact that they link back to some of the choices by sort of showcasing those locked options, I think I've already said is like a kind of a nice way of doing it as well. So where would we be? So a good is some interesting choices and attempts to manage the player's agency. So I think that's pretty much what I've just described, right? We've got some interesting choices, and the way that they lock those things off and sort of try and hint at things and use the loyalty system to sort of lock choices definitely manages the choices that the player has. So I think that's pretty clear cut good.
Oh yeah, is what you're saying about the sunglasses with Kevin.
Cool guy Kevin. So yeah, again, like there's... Yeah, so I'm not going to harp on this too much because we've already talked about the choices, but here, for example, we can kind of like intuit some elements of this, right? So if we divide the donut equally, I guess everyone gets like a little bit of loyalty, except for whoever bought the donuts, maybe. Barry bought the donuts, so he gets the last one, so maybe his goes up the most and everyone else is kind of fine with it as he bought them. Dave says, just throw them all away. Just throw it away because we're disagreeing. I imagine that's not going to make people happy. And this is that sort of weird ground between it's not a calculation because we don't know what's happening, but it definitely feels like this answer is worse than the others.
Yeah.
Barry grabs the donut and eats it. Kevin and Greg are unhappy. Dave is relieved that the source of the problem is gone. Okay, which I guess kind of makes sense, although now Kevin's no longer got his super ability, which is the whole reason I gave him the fancy glasses. Okay, so this is effectively our... so we're getting into another fight with another 4 people that are camping, and there's a large one, a plain one, a tall one, and a lame one. So it's effectively a mirror matchup. And again, this is kind of an interesting choice because it explicitly tells us what the consequences are going to be, but one of them isn't necessarily right. So you get effectively Barry can knock out anti-Barry, Dave can knock out anti-Dave, and so on. Get Barry to get rid of anti-Barry. Cool. So in terms of poetics, what is the theme of this story, do you think?
No. So I would say this was also... we've had a few of these before as well, but this is also the bear and the 2 travellers.
Yeah, so it's
Because
it's about friendship and loyalty, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
interesting how we're seeing quite similar mechanics expressed in different games. Like, I don't think. So I mean, the fact that we've both just said, well, yeah, it's definitely this one, means that, yeah, there are elements of it that are definitely being shown, and it's being done through the mechanics rather than the premise, because there haven't been any bears yet, and I do emphasise the yet. But because, and going back to what we've already said about the choices, because we're not choosing to lower somebody's loyalty at the expense of the others, or rather, we are making that choice, but we have somewhat limited agency over that, right? Like, it's not like a case of we're saying we're going to throw Dave to the wolves to save everyone else. It's not conflicting with it. I would say it's not fully supporting it. So where are we looking? So narrative and gameplay do not interfere with each other, but the key mechanics have little to do with the themes of the story. I don't think we're there. I think we're above that. Narrative and game. So a good would be a narrative and gameplay complement one another, as the key mechanics are in keeping with the themes. And to be an excellent, it would be they support and emphasize one another. And I think we're definitely at the good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm umming and ahhing about maybe it's between a good and an excellent, but I think, again, sort of because of maybe some of those issues with agency, it impacts some of these things as well. But I think it's solidly at a good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okie doke.
Okay.
So next is the pacing. So do we feel like, the drama is increasing as we go?
I would say it was fairly flat.
Yeah, and part of the issue is because it's what's the word? So there are consequences for everyone being at low loyalty by the time we get to the end, but until then, there's relatively little consequences. So it doesn't actually matter if we're upsetting everyone as we go. Part of it is because it's interesting, like picking quite a mundane activity, like 4 friends going on a road trip, like is kind of an interesting twist on some of like the epic narratives that we've seen, right? But it also means that you have to perhaps work a bit harder to make sure that it feels like there are stakes and like things are getting more dramatic. Like I don't know if like we were running out of sausages or something as we went on, and we had nothing left to barbecue, and I don't know, something to sort of up the ante a little bit. So mechanically, like the fights, for example, are getting a little bit harder as we go, partly due to the enemies we're pitted against, but also partly due to like people's decreasing loyalty perhaps as we go. So there is some amount of ascendant pacing because we are like incentivized to try and keep everyone's loyalty up, and that gets harder to do as we go on. Although I'm not sure it actually does get much harder to do. It's like you say, it's a bit flat. Greg wants to... There we go.
And then to get to like a good level, we're thinking about ascending pacing with a clear final peak. I suppose we are definitely going to have a clear final peak with a bear which may or may not turn up.
There we go, there's the wasp paying off. There we go. So we still got sausages and it's still fine. So here we go, yeah, this is the climactic finale, I guess. We have to defeat a bear. Somebody, and I can't remember who, had a special ability that was bear spray. Oh no, so this is the thing. Our best skill for Barry is pick up somebody else and hit the thing with it, which is effective but decreases their loyalty. Doesn't seem that effective either. Yeah, unfortunately Dave's loyalty isn't high enough that we can use the bear spray, but I think we can still deal with it okay. Can I use it on... Dave used share a meal. Anyway, pacing. Yeah, so there is. It's interesting. It's flat, but with a clear final peak, which I guess averages out to a satisfactory.
Yes, actually, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's where we are. So next is techniques. So how are they conveying the story? And I guess I think this is part of the issue that we were sort of talking about before as well. There isn't a hugely coherent narrative, right? It's like there's a number of sort of like minor scenes, but you could basically put those in any order and it wouldn't affect the overall story, and that's why the pacing feels a bit weird.
And the extra stuff that they do, I suppose, is the only reason why it comes at that stage, if that makes sense. So, like you say, you could reorder everything had it not been for like the radio, where like just directed football to avoid the fight, that kind of thing. But I suppose those kind of like points within the game shouldn't be the reason why it's structured that way.
Greg. Okay. So yeah, it's interesting because we don't even really have dialogue, right? We effectively have the sort of, I guess, narration, if you like. We've got a text box telling us the state of things, and then we get a pick. But there's no sort of like dialogue between the characters. We don't sort of have like sort of any cutscenes, or like dialogue barks in the sort of the gameplay bits, the battle bits, or things like that.
The character-driven bit is all basically right at the start, where you're told if Kevin is cool and Barry is a baller and all that sort of stuff. But like you say, I think you mentioned this earlier on as well, there's nothing throughout the story that would suggest that that like that is the case, if that makes sense. Yes, the skills also do convey that, but there's nothing within the story that kind of confirms it, if that makes sense. If we weren't told it, then we wouldn't know.
Yeah. I mean, like, the actions that they take definitely reflect their characters. So there is, like, some amount of characterization that goes on throughout. So, Barry likes to, get in fights in pubs, and that's his immediate reaction to getting in a fight. So, there is some done through it, but in terms of the techniques they use to convey it, it's a little bit limited. So where are we? We effectively have sort of narration as like the technique that they're using to convey all of this, which puts them sort of smack in the middle of satisfactory, I think. Yeah. Okie doke. So moving on to the last item, which is I was doing so well, and I got distracted by actually talking about the mark scheme, and I've appeared to have lost everyone. The feedback. So what did they say about the feedback they were given in the lab sessions?
So they said one of the feedback was renaming happiness to loyalty, which kind of makes sense. I'm sure there are...
Okay, what effect has that had? Like, why were they told to make that change, and why did it improve the game to make?
I suppose it was because it doesn't fully go with the fable and the story.
Right.
Thing. I assume they haven't actually said that, but I'm guessing that's why they've done it, to make. Yeah. But loyalty and happiness are very different. So.
But in terms of if it was called happiness instead of loyalty, if I were it wouldn't change the. I don't know. I don't feel like it would change the tone of the game at all. You're right. It draws it closer to the fable, perhaps by calling it loyalty, but it doesn't. The mechanical effects or anything aren't really affected by that. So, okay, sure. it's a change. I'm not sure it's like a very impactful change, but it's a change. Anything else they mentioned?
They said, one of them was make the combat system more entwined with the narrative. They said there were no ways of decreasing loyalty during combat.
Okay.
So making a mechanic where players could get back up and have their loyalty lowered.
Okay, so that I think like that's a more impactful change, right? That's definitely sort of like tweaking the structure of their underlying mechanics, and I think that definitely has an impact on the way you play it. Like, do you want to prioritize using your skill to defend somebody who's at risk of losing loyalty, knowing that then you lose a turn? In fact, that actually ties it a bit more strongly in terms of the poetics. So I think without some of those changes, like the sort of theme and poetics would have been a lot more difficult to pick out. So I think that's actually quite a good change.
Yeah. Did you? I actually don't know if that actually came up. I don't know if you noticed that at all, because I was only half paying attention to the gameplay. But was there any point in it when someone was downed and you could use an ability to get them back up, but their loyalty was lowered?
So you can't use an ability to get them back up. I think they just automatically get up after a turn. But what you can do is, if somebody's at low health, you can pick you can defend rather than attacking with them, so they don't take that damage that will push them over the edge, I think is the idea.
Yeah.
Or if you're Barry, you might choose not to pick them up and hit an enemy with them. So yeah, okay. I think that's actually a reasonable change. Any other bits of feedback that they mentioned, or was that the main one?
There's another one where make sure there are multiple forced battles. I think it might have been because the combat section could have been entirely optional, so you could play it that way. So they balanced out the number of forced and optional combat encounters, which is fair enough, I suppose. And then another bit of feedback was make sure that they had a reason to use each skill. I suppose this is what we were talking about as well with balancing. We tend to make it so that there was a reason to use each skill in the game display, ensuring that each skill had its own benefits and sometimes even downsides to being used, like what you just mentioned with Barry's skill with hitting someone, or hitting something with someone.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So
yeah,
I feel like making the skill that's the hardest to unlock have a downside is it's an interesting choice of balance. I'm not going to disagree with it, but I would say if you're working really, really hard to unlock a skill, that should be almost the best skill. You might have the lower loyalty skill have some of those consequences. So it's a case of, do I use this now, or do I wait and try and boost the loyalty to boost the effects of it, kind of a thing. I think that change might have had mixed effects. And again, sort of the overall balance of the combat. I'm not sure you did need to use all of the skills. Like, it was relatively easy to get through with just spamming attack. But I don't think it's harmed things. But I don't think it was as successful as they were hoping. So overall, one bit of feedback that I think didn't really have one change that didn't really have much impact. One that I think was quite impactful and quite successful, and one that perhaps had some limited success. So overall, I would say that's probably between a satisfactory and a good. Like, it would have been nice if they'd sort of talked about why they felt some of those balance changes were important, or how it's improved their game, or what they were trying to avoid. And the same with the structuring things so that there are optional battles or not. Like, why is it important that the player always has to have a battle? Like, what was it that they were trying to avoid by getting rid of the pacifist run, if you like? But yeah, overall, from what we can glean about why they've made those changes, I think those changes have been successful. So yeah. Okay, and with that, that brings us to the end of this game. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, and this game is Ascend. So again, nice title screen, nice big chunky buttons this time. Let's hit start. Another day in the fields. Why does life have to be so boring? Why can't God give us a big treehouse to live in, or rain pizza from the sky? That would be so much more fun. That does sound pretty fun.
Yeah.
If I was God, I could do so much better. And then, ooh, big shadow. You really think so? Big feet as well, I see.
Yeah.
We got a Bruce Almighty moment. I've been caring for this town for 10,000 years, and as it happens, I've been getting bored as well. So if you think you could do so much better, you should take my place. Interesting. What's the word? Use of agency there. We have one button, and the button says yes. We cannot refuse. Welcome to Godhood, Farmer Joe. So it's Joe Almighty. Your job is to take care of this little village called Fandolin. That rings a bell. And help them through various scenarios. Aim to keep your village resources, the bars below, above zero to stay alive. So we've got some kind of initial tutorial. Again, it maybe be nice if this was sort of a bit drip-fed over the course of a game rather than just all in one big lump here, because I'm sure I'm going to forget parts of it. But, so each event we're going to be presented with some choices. They'll either cost magic, which is at the top left, which are our godly power. We get 10 per turn. Some choices may impact the village resources, which are at the bottom. Okay. Your villagers start to panic as a cloud of smoke appears a few miles east. Their desperate prayers and pleas reach you. What do? This is kind of interesting because we've got this lovely sort of spinning, although the spinning is beginning to get to me a little bit. There isn't really a way to stop that. But we've got this really nice 3D world, but we can't see it because there's a big UI over the top of it. So I wonder if that will change. So what do? Do we do nothing? We clear the surrounding forest. Oh, I see, the trees are on fire. It's not like mysterious evil smoke, it's just the trees are on fire, so we can clear some forest or we can cause a rainstorm.
Clear some forest?
Yeah, let's clear some forest. Hearing Fandolin's call for help, you begin to clear the surrounding area of flammable greenery. In the event that the fire reaches the village, it will not be engulfed. This results in one of your village's primary food sources to no longer be available. Okay, so that lost us a big chunk of food. We can't... Okay, so we can go back and forth here.
And then next turn.
So, minor bit of information design. It would be nice if, these would grayed out if they weren't actually clickable, but okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what we've got these stars up here as well, but I don't know what they do.
Yeah.
Next set. So the past few days have been peaceful. Your people finally have the time to expand and improve the city. Well, there's plenty of chopped down wood over there, so you can probably use all of that. I see. So we can magic them up a treehouse for 20 magic, or we can get them to do a bunch of other things that cost 0 magic. Well, I tell you what. Given that we just cost them a bunch of food, let's make more farmland. We tell them to prioritize making farmland. They take your advice and over the next coming weeks expanding their farms that are now able to produce more harvest. Food's gone down though by 20.
It has.
Is that just because they eat every turn, or is... I don't know, I'm not sure about the link there. A child is discovered to have great talent. You have the ability to influence the child to be great at whatever you wish. We can leave it up to fate. We can make them a chef, or we can make them a fighter.
Ooh.
Again, it's not really clear what the consequences of these choices are going to be, right? I assume if we make them a fighter, maybe that's good for our defense. Maybe if we make them a chef, that's good for our food. But I don't know. Let's leave it up to fate and see what happens. So the food went up. You believe that leaving the choice to them is the best option. You do not influence what they invest their talent, resulting in an overall amazing jack of all trades, from cooking up a hearty meal to... Okay, so I guess that would boost them both a little bit, but our defences are already full, is what I'm assuming there. Your desire to improve and develop your town has intrigued your seniors. We've got a senior god. We're already learning so much about the cosmology of this multiverse. So we've got one wish, but I'm already magic. Why do I need wishes? Okay. So we can guide people to the town, presumably population. We can expand the farmland, presumably food, or ability to help more. I mean, by process of elimination, I imagine that's defenses, but who knows, right? Hey, let's expand the farmland, right? Because we're still low on food. Aha! So it looks like it went down there, but it actually increased our maximum.
See?
So you begin to have Phandolin's food worries to be lightened. In the morning they find a previously dead plot of land to be brimming with green life and has decided to expand their farmland. Ooh. Has this question mark always been here, or have I only just noticed it?
Yeah, I can't remember actually.
Upstream you spot a great wave of water surging down the river, or is this like because it's an important event? When it hits the town, it will cause great destruction. We can levitate the village into the sky, we can dry the land around Phandolin, or we can do nothing. Well, we've got a whole bunch of magic saved up. This seems like an excellent opportunity to just lift it up, let all the water run under it, and then put it back down. The villagers stand in awe and wonder. See, we're not going to mess around telling them to build boats or anything like that. We're just going to lift the whole village up. And then we safely set it back down. The people rejoice. They'll expect you to do the same next time. Well, hang on a minute. I'll be able to do the same in about 5 turns? Whatever a turn is, anyway. The village has an extremely bountiful harvest this season and have no idea what to do with it. They've never seen this much food before. A lot of these seem to revolve around food, so we can sacrifice some to us. Maybe that will give us magic. Share it with a neighbouring village. Maybe that will give us population, I don't know, or tell them to eat it. Who knows? I'll leave this one up to you. What should we do this time?
Ooh, let's tell them to eat.
Tell them to eat. There we go. So maximum food has gone up by a little bit, and actual food has gone up by quite a lot. That seems like a good idea. Neighbouring village is jealous. Ooh, so we can't destroy the enemy army. So here we go, nice bit of information design. This bit's greyed out because we can't select it. So we can do nothing, or we can send a heroic commander, which we can just about afford. Let's do that. From amongst your finest angels, we select Alice. Alice the Angel. They charge into battle. It's not an easy fight, but with their new leader, success is inevitable. So we've lost... Wow, we lost a lot of population and a chunk of defences as well. And now we're totally out of magic, almost totally out of magic. Cloud of smoke appears a few miles to the east. Oh no, we've run into this problem before. We can't do anything. They panic even more. They're unable to form a proper plan of escape. Although, that didn't seem to do anything.
No, I don't think did that alter anything?
It didn't seem to, no. Maybe our population was naturally going up, and that reduced it by the same amount. So this would be like another nice bit of information design, just having like a plus 60 hearts, or a a plus 20 shields, or a minus 10 beer mugs, or whatever, to really sort of emphasize what's changing.
Yeah.
Watching over your country about new people. So we can post guards to watch out for sick people. We can bless a villager with magic. We'll do nothing. God is resting currently. This sign they deem the rumours to be false and continue their lives as normal. And that doesn't seem to have affected anything either. So I assume that's fine. That probably won't come back to haunt us, right? The ground's frozen solid. The year's harvest is ruined. We don't know where the food was from. So we can teleport food from our neighbours. That seems a bit mean. Let's do nothing. So we're running low on food now and on population. After 10 long days, it becomes clear that no help will arrive, and they desperately scour the land for anything edible. They discover new ways to hunt and methods of cooking with poisonous plants. It's a painful experience, but with their newfound knowledge, one they will never have to repeat. Ooh, and we've got a star now. I don't know what the stars do. It's a bright and sunny day in Phandolin, and your people have decided to celebrate a festival in our name. Hide in the festival, watch the festival, or appear before... Let's hide in... That seems... I don't know, that seems like a godly thing to do. We'll put on a big pig robe and sort of pretend that we're having a lovely time and see how nice people are to us. We disguise ourselves with our strengthened bond to our people. Ooh, now we're getting an extra +5 magic a turn. That sounds pretty good. A child is discovered to have great talent. It feels like this time we actually do need them to turn into a chef. Although Jack of all trades last time was pretty good, right? And this won't cost us any magic, so let's do that. So a little bit of food, a little bit of fences. So some of these events seem to come up a couple of times. Some of them are maybe unique, based on the wording at least. Our town is very much not at maximum capacity, no matter what this event says. Your people pray and ask you for guidance, turn them away, create space for them, have them join the army, or make room for them. So, create space for them and make room for them sound like they're doing the same thing, but I imagine create space is literally magicking space for them to appear, and make room for them is just cramming more people in. Let's create a magical space for them. They have a promising future, it's worth our time to give them a home. So, again, that doesn't seem to have affected anything directly, but maybe that will come up. Ooh, we've got this event again. Let's go for the hide in the festival one again, because another +5 a turn actually seems pretty good. Okie doke. Ignoring it seemed to work last time.
Oh?
Or is this...
Did you select do nothing? Because it didn't trigger anything.
I haven't selected it yet, although you're right, it seems to be a bit highlighted.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, okay.
I don't want to create the magical barrier, but it feels like putting our little village into quarantine. Ah yes, food. I forgot about that. The band of adventurers is back, and they haven't really done anything, so I don't know why you would want to create space for them. Let's have them join the army instead. Due to some unfortunate events, there are some spare bunks in the barracks. There sure are. Oh, active soldiers eat a lot, so we've lost all of our food, so game over.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Alright, that's kind of neat. So let's start taking a look at the mark scheme, and I'll play through again, and I'll pick some different options. So an interesting premise there, where we're a farmer. Like, this would be very easy to just be like, you know, you're the god of this village. It's kind of interesting that they take a farmer and elevate you. I guess that's going to tie into the theme and the poetics, although... I mean, I guess we'll kind of see about that. But first off, overall quality, so presentation and play, information design.
So, this is where most of the key information in the game is shown. And if anything, I think we've got a bit too much information, because we still don't know what these stars do. I suppose was that our final score at the end of the game?
Yeah, I feel like that might be, you know, like the overall like prosperity of the village or things like that. So as that goes up, maybe we start getting different events or something, but you're right, that's not hugely clear. I think otherwise though, like almost all of the information is shown very clearly. Like, it's very obvious, like, you know, here are the 3 important stats, keep these above 0. Here's like your resource allowing you to do that. Here's the cost of everything. It could be clearer, because as we've said, it'd be really nice if there was a big, you know, +20 shield, -10 heart, or something like that to really emphasize what's happened. Even if, so we can talk about this when we talk about, you know, agency and interestingness of choices. Whether or not you want to hide the consequences of those choices before we pick it, it should be pretty clear what numbers have changed afterwards, and keeping an eye on 4 different bars at the same time to see how they've been affected, it would just simplify that a little bit. So it feels like to me, we're sort of torn between most of the key information is shown, but all the information that is shown pretty clearly.
Yeah.
I feel like the clarity could be improved a bit. Maybe between a satisfactory and a good. Or rather, between a satisfactory and a good, or up at a good. What do you think?
I see what you mean. I'd probably say a good, because it is shown very clearly. And I don't know. I thought I'd put it more, but between a satisfactory and an excellent, and an average would be a good.
Yeah.
So,
okay. So in that case, I think you're right. I think it's a good. Okie doke. Graphics. So this is interesting. There are some nice graphics, but they are kind of hidden behind this interface. They don't really have any kind of actual bearing on the game. It could all just be like a black screen behind this, and it would play exactly the same.
Yeah.
It feels like they've kind of missed a bit of an opportunity to show these choices having an impact on the world, right? So if we pick plant a new farmland, the interface disappears. I'm pointing at my screen as if that's helpful. The interface disappears, and then we see a new farm appear on the map. We see the village actually change and grow and things like that. Obviously, it depends on what assets you've got, and they've obviously prioritized the actual sort of mechanical gameplay rather than some of that little bits of polish. I just noticed one of those trees is flying as well. But otherwise, the graphics themselves are nice. I think the fact that the camera's constantly moving, I don't really like. It's a bit distracting given how inconsequential the background is.
Yeah.
And it makes some of the text a little bit tricky to read instead. Yeah, exactly, because it draws the eye away from the important bit. That said, they've put a lot of work into the UI, right? Having it as scraps of paper with sort of interesting fonts on. All of the UI elements are really, really nicely, they really pop, don't they? So I would say, consistent, effective, and even appealing graphics. I don't think they hit prize-worthy, because again, it would be nice if the graphics of the background actually sort of changed and evolved as we were playing. But I think this probably hits an excellent still.
Yeah.
Audio. We've got some lovely music, sort of typical sort of god game music, sort of very, I don't know, ethereal and medievally. Flutes? I want to say flutes. It's probably not a flute. Anyway, but yeah, some nice music. I'm just trying to... this is a new event that we haven't seen before, actually. So there are some UI clicks as we sort of click on the buttons and things like that, and sort of sheafs of paper as we scroll through.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. It'd
be nice if they'd done a little bit more with that, maybe playing a particular sound when you lose defenses or something, combat happening in the distance or whatever. More farmland. But otherwise, it works out quite nicely. I'm pretty sure this exclamation mark is new.
Yeah.
So it makes me think that this is a particularly dramatic event or something like that. Rain food from the sky. Magical feast and rain down delicious cheese and tomato covered bread circles. My favourite. So in that case, a good would be complementary audio effects and music. Excellent would be complementary and appealing. Feels like it's sort of between the two. I think they could have done a bit more with the effects, but the ones they've got are really nice. And obviously to sort of bump it up beyond excellent into prizeworthy, you'd want something sort of more adaptive as well. So music that changes based on your current stats, for example, or more sort of consistent use of those effects.
So mechanics. This is interesting because there's not really a lot of mechanics in a way, is there? We're given choices about what to do. We can spend magic.
Yeah, it's sort of a typical resource balancing game, right? We've got events that increase or decrease certain numbers, and that's kind of it. So I think we'd be pushed to say that it's a wide set. I don't think it quite reaches the excellent level there, but I think it's probably at the good level. It is a set of complementary mechanics. It's possibly a little bit simple in that term, so maybe between a satisfactory and a good.
Yeah.
Because they are consistent, they are complementary, but there is a very limited amount of them. So perhaps between a satisfactory and a good.
Yeah, that's fair. I suppose it's the same sort of things for controls as well, isn't it? It's they're effective, as in you can, you hover over with the mouse and you're showing something else, more information design, but still it's limited in a way that all we do is choose.
Yeah, it's very tricky. We get quite a lot of these types of games that are just very sort of UI focused, and personally I really enjoy that style of game. I think you can do a lot with it. When we get to this stage in the mark scheme though, it's difficult because similarly to there's quite few mechanics, there's quite few controls as a result. So it is just click on button, continue, that's pretty much it. So poor, for example, a pass would be few controls, a good would be a reasonable set of smooth and usable controls. So I think it probably averages out to sort of around the satisfactory.
Yeah.
So although we've said there's a relatively limited set of mechanics and controls, I still think the game is complex enough for a sort of a prototype that you might put on your portfolio. And we haven't come across any bugs yet.
No.
So I think for now we mark that as an excellent, and we'll revisit that if need be.
Mm-hmm.
Which takes us to how we fulfill the brief, or rather how they have fulfilled the brief. So the first thing we'll be looking at is the story engine, so how the game world impacts the story and how the story impacts the game. What have they mentioned in their game notes about this?
So for the first one, how the game world affects the story. So the player makes choices and creates the emergent narrative, telling the story of how the village coped with the struggles it faces. Each choice not only displays a unique result, but also adjusts the weight of future events, enabling players' choices to shape the narrative in both the short and long term. Okay. Interesting. We don't really get an indication of that, I suppose, do we? Of actually where...
Well, so there are some events like this. So I don't know if we mechanically get a... if we're mechanically told that, unless that's what this exclamation mark means, that this will impact future events. But we definitely sort of narratively get the sense, things like the plague appearing. I imagine the choice to ignore it makes more plague events more likely to happen later, although that is me just guessing.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah. That's pretty much all they've put. They said about, depending on how the player is performing, the narrative will change. So if you select options where the food decreases at quite a rapid rate, then there's more chance for the villagers to resort to desperate measures, so stealing food to survive and all that sort of things.
So that's interesting, that one. Oh, did that increase population? So I improved the weapons, but I don't think it affected defences at all. Maybe it increased population. So I was going to say two things. One, it's always tricky with these kinds of games where the gameplay is pretty closely tied with interacting with the narrative, right? You'd be hard pushed to sort of draw a line between story choices and gameplay choices here, because they are both just clicking on buttons in a UI. But the other thing is, what is the narrative here? Is there a story? Because I'm not 100% convinced that there is. There are a bunch, there's a number of events that are chosen randomly, but are they strung together into a story?
Not particularly, are they? I mean, we're given a good sort of introduction. We have a farmer and he's a bit bored, and so is God, and therefore, I mean, that was quite a...
It was a premise.
Comical.
But yeah, we don't have an ongoing story, right? It's not like... Yeah. So if, for example, there were bunch of random events, and then like a story event where like a particular thing happens and it always happens, and then a bunch more random events, and then a story event that builds on that first story event, like it continues the story, so to speak.
Yeah, it'd be quite cool, interesting to see that, you know, sort of the play between God and the farmer, in a sense. So like, you know, you do a certain number of events and then God is displeased with you or something, and you could sort of continue the comical kind of aspect of it, which would have been quite nice to see. But then again, like, you know, this is only a prototype, I suppose, so
Okay, so game world to story. So do they mention in their game notes that the numbers affect the weighting of the events that are likely to come up?
yes. So if you're low on food, like you are now, there's more chance of sort of food related sort of like things to come up in the future. So people are starving, and, you know, people do things, and that, you know, triggers other events.
So I would say that is an example of the game affecting the story, because the current state of our numbers is affecting the events that happen. I think it's tricky because it's not a coherent story still, right? It's literally like events chosen at random, or more or less at random, or random and a bit weighted. It doesn't feel like it has that progression through it, but in terms of story engine, where would we put that? So a satisfactory, for example, would be some examples of where the game world impacts the story. And I think it might be there. A good would be it impacts the story in important ways, and that's, I guess, my argument, right? It's not impacting it in an important way, it's just changing the weight of the events we get, but it's not actually causing the story to unfold in any particular way.
Yeah.
A pass would be sparse or minor examples, and maybe it's sort of between a pass and a satisfactory.
That's more where I would put it, because I thought, yes, we've got more examples of where that happens, but I feel like they're sort of all very similar sort of thing.
Yeah, I think we'll get onto that when we're talking about the techniques and pacing as well. But okay, so I think between a pass and a satisfactory there, because, you know, the numbers are having an impact on effectively the story we're being told, but because of the nature of that story, they're not having like a necessarily important impact on the course of the story, because the course of the story cycles a lot. There's not a lot of well, we'll talk about that in a moment. Story to game world. Does the story affect the game or the way in which we play? Again, kind of. Like, it changes like the numbers we have, and it changes the maximum of those numbers, which perhaps causes to play in slightly different ways. Like, if we have maxed, so for example, I've been trying to max out our amount of magic and our magic generation, so now I feel that I can spam my magical abilities a little bit more, but it's still not having, you know, we're still just clicking choices in a menu. It's not dramatically changing the course of the game. It's not changing, you know, the way people, for example, react to us as a god, because the events are all kind of like individual and static. Like, we don't unlock, as far as I can tell, we don't unlock new decisions or new abilities through our choices within the story.
No, I suppose we don't. I mean, I suppose there are some choices locked off to us, aren't there? Like there is now, because we don't have enough magic. But
that's game affecting story still, right? Because that's our choices being based on the numbers. Oh, that's interesting.
Ooh, see what you mean by that background. I have to look away for a bit. So they put.
Nope, we just lost because we ran out of food, and there wasn't anything that we could do there because that event couldn't give us any food, so we were just doomed at that point. Okay, so yeah, it feels like maybe between a pass and a satisfactory again, because again, it's sort of difficult to say that the story is having like any major impact on the game world.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, richness of structure.
interesting. I
or
actually can
aided-
say no. I thought the first time we saw this there was only a yes button, but it turns out there was a no button, and it just takes me back to the main menu.
Oh, okay.
Ooh, interesting.
Oh,
I've got
yes,
a different
I've
star
got
this
this.
time.
Oh, yeah.
Why do I have a different... What do these stars mean?
So interesting. I've just got brought up the narrative structure, and yeah, there is a secret win option. If you are in the main menu for 10 seconds or more, a no option appears.
Oh,
Yeah,
hang on. Sorry, is that the secret win?
that's the secret win.
I'm not sure how I like how they framed that, because that means like the only winning move is not to play. I guess that's going to come back when we talk about poetics and pacing, but it feels like it's a bit. If you think the way of winning your game is to not play it, yeah, I don't know. So yeah, this is interesting. So we have a star up here now, which I think is we let the village burn down, and now they know not to burn, or rather, now they know to make their houses out of stone rather than wood. So maybe this is something signifying that, you know, like our village is upgraded in a particular way. Maybe we're going to get less of those fire events now that they're smart enough to not.
Yeah, okay. And the aim is, I suppose, to get all 5 stars so that the village is completely self-sustaining.
That would be my guess. But again, information design being what it is, we are just guessing.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of the branches, yeah, what branches do they say that they have within their structure?
So they have. So after the introductory screen, they say they determine severity. I'm not really sure what they mean by determine severity. I'm guessing that's with the stats that you've got in front of you, how you're doing really. You either get a blessing or a minor something, or a disaster.
I guess the disasters are the one with the question mark, the exclamation mark.
Yeah, it must be. And then it chooses a random blessing or a minor something or a disaster, like a minor event or a disaster. Player makes a decision, adjusts some resources, and then it goes round again. Yeah.
So this is the thing, right? Is this a story?
Yeah.
If it's
doesn't
just
branch,
a
does it,
sequence of
really?
events that. Well, I mean, it's really tricky to think about this one. Okay, let's look at it in terms of... So, for example, there are branches because we have these stars, and these stars are presumably then constraining the way that the events can appear in future and things like that.
Oh, I suppose.
There are two ways of looking at this, right? Like, here's the thing. It's a game that is nothing but choices and therefore nothing but branches, which arguably puts it sort of somewhere between the excellent and the prizeworthy, because all it is just interconnected branches. The problem is that it's lacking the sort of structure of a story that makes that meaningful.
Yeah. Yeah, but in a way, they have hacked the mark scheme, you know, in a way. It's
interesting because just looking at the mark scheme, under richness of structure, absent would be a story with no branches, and it feels like we have the total opposite of that, which is branches but not really with a story. But looking at this in a, what's the word? Being optimistic about this, they have a structure with a lot of different branches, and those branches impact sort of some of the choices that can be made in the future. I think this could be between a good and an excellent for that reason.
It's quite interesting that this is the number of branching points throughout the game, and then prizeworthy in the mark scheme is a network of branches and paths through the story.
Ooh, that's interesting picking up on that wording, but you're kind of right.
So, with that in mind, I would say it's excellent.
You know what? Yeah, sure. Okay, I will go with that. I will say again that absent requires it to be a story, but
Yes, that's. Oh God, yeah.
but no,
Yeah,
I
it's alright,
think
isn't
you're
it?
right. I think here's the thing. I think we say that the richness of structure, it is excellent because it is just choices and branches and things like that, and the branches you take affect the likelihood of other branches coming up. And yeah, I don't think it hits. Although it is a network of branches, again, I don't think it hits the prize-worthy because it doesn't have the overall structure of a story.
Yes.
But if we move on
Yeah.
to quality of choices, are these choices interesting? And again, actually,
I suppose they are
on
in
their
the
own,
sense that
they are, because
yeah.
we're not only sort of trying to determine, what kind of god are we? Are we going to smite the villains or protect our townsfolk or whatever? The problem is the fact that the same event can come up multiple times. Does that undermine the interestingness of them? Or, equally, does it enhance it? Because it's interesting from a mechanical perspective, because we're trying to balance our resources, but it's not necessarily interesting from a story perspective, because it's all about balancing the resources rather than understanding or expanding on the story, which makes me think that are they then calculations rather than choices? Like, for example, if we were super low on food here, we have to pick this, because otherwise we'll lose. I don't know what building a treehouse does here. Let's do that just to find out. During your life as a farmer, you've heard tales of seemingly floating home. Okay, we've made a treehouse. Good.
Okay. Interestingly, as well, I've just sort of seen in the branching in the structure that they've presented. If you beat all the disasters, you win, which is interesting. So I suppose maybe the 5 stars are 5 disasters.
Okay.
I suppose we'll know with more clicking.
Yeah, I guess I will try and click faster and not get distracted.
Oh no, that wasn't a comment. I was. Yeah.
But yeah, this is it's really tricky. Yeah.
It would be nice to know what the stars mean.
I reckon you've hit the nail on the head there. Then, based on what they've added in those games, in which case it is almost the thing that I was talking about earlier, where we have random events and then a disaster, which is the main story focus. It's kind of a shame that they're not linked together, so they don't necessarily evolve. And we'll talk about this when we talk about pacing. But they kind of do have that then, if there are like set events that you can beat. But then again, if you can beat them, it means there's a correct answer, which means the choices become less interesting because you're just going through them until you find the correct one. So a good would be some interesting choices and attempts to manage the player agency. Excellent would be interesting choices and an effective system for managing agency. I think this is probably, now that we've deliberated it, I think it's probably at the good. Because the choices are kind of interesting. They are more interesting from a mechanical perspective of, balancing and things like that, and that's dangerously close to becoming a calculation. There are some interesting sort of things they've done with agency, like, locking off choices if you don't have the resources for it. Equally, that kind of locks you into certain choices because, like I say, if you're low on food, then you're going to have to pick all of the ones that give you food, which sort of takes that out of your hands a little bit again and kind of reduces your agency. But overall, I'm thinking good, maybe between a satisfactory and a good. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. That's really good, yeah.
Okie doke. We've made a pineapple. Ha!
Oh, sorry, that was for poetics, was it?
Yes. So here we go. We've got. Sorry, that was that was quality of choices. We're on to poetics now. So I'm guessing this is another disaster. So we've done the rain food from the sky one. We've done the do nothing one. Right, let's try this one and see if this one gives us a star. By taking the last of... Okay. Yeah, see, that didn't seem to... Maybe it was the... I'm trying to remember, was it the raining food from the sky one that got us a star last time then?
I can't remember. Yeah, it might have been. Can't remember. Oh.
Okay, anyway, poetics. So what is the moral of the fable that they are trying to tell? So this is kind of interesting.
I feel like this is the crane, was it the farmer and the crane?
See, I was going to say, is it the tortoise and the eagle?
Oh, sorry, yeah, tortoise and the eagle. I get confused. Yes,
Well, I mean, there's a farmer in it, right? Which is like what my first thought was. And you could argue that, you know, you be a good god for as long as you can, and then you have to start smiting things. But
yeah.
So did they mention this in their game notes?
So they went with the tortoise and the eagle. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So that is what I expected, because, you know, the premise is you're given a whole bunch of power, and based on their secret winning strategy, the only sort of correct thing to do is to not get that, which is, I don't know. I don't feel like the mechanics of their game really reflect that moral, because being God is awesome. Like, we can save the village over and over again. Like, the power is never a problem.
Yeah, because the other option that we have, which is, you know, clicking no right at the start, though these disasters would still happen.
Yeah, like the village would still be on fire, attacked, underwater, and plagued.
Yeah.
So yeah, it kind of feels like, if that's the fable that they're going for, that actually some of the mechanics do kind of conflict with the themes of the story they're trying to tell.
So I suppose maybe then we're at the sort of satisfactory level.
No, a poor would be narrative and gameplay are in conflict, and that's kind of close to where we are. A pass would be the narrative and gameplay have some conflicts, so maybe that's a bit closer to where we are. Like, some of the mechanics go against the themes of the story. And like I say, you know, the theme of the tortoise and the eagle, or the moral of that fable is, you know, if a man gets all he desired, then he's going to be ruined.
Yes.
But that never happens in this game. Like, we can kill everyone in the village, but we're still God. And equally, you know, we get all of this power and amazement, and we save the village over and over again. Like, I guess you could argue that the thing that we're told that we want in the little introduction is a treehouse and a rain of pizza, and neither of those seem to be great options. But even so, I feel like we're sort of at the pass level here. So, like, the premise definitely sort of sets up the theme, which is why I don't think they're at a poor. But the actual mechanics of the game don't necessarily jive with the story that they're trying to evoke.
Yeah.
Okie doke. Which takes us on to pacing. What do you think about the pacing in this game?
I suppose there is some. I'm trying to think of it. There's probably some ascending pacing because your resources do deplete. So right now you've got quite low on defenses. So you're trying not to choose options that would decrease your defenses too much to zero, so you'd lose the game. So I suppose.
Interesting.
At the start of the game, you're more hopeful, I suppose, and sort of like mid-game, you're sort of more careful about what options that you pick. That's what I'm.
So that's really interesting. So you're arguing that there is some inherent pacing because you've got it's effectively a survival game, right? You've got these resources that are ticking down, and you're sort of, as they all begin to get lower and lower and lower, the tension naturally rises as a result. So,
not a lot, but yes.
So mechanically, I agree with you. Narratively, this ties back to what we were saying about the story, right? The events are randomly generated and more or less independent from one another. So we can get an event, the disaster event, and then that same first event again, which means the pacing of the narratively, sort of the dramatic stakes, don't follow the same pacing curve as the mechanics do. Interestingly, what I was going to say was, so overall, I think the pacing is, maybe a bit unclear or flat, but because they have the special disaster events, they have multiple peaks throughout the game. What they don't have is a climax, right? It's not leading towards something. It will go on indefinitely, depending on the choices that I make. So as long as I can keep us alive, and I don't manage to get all 5 stars, the game will just go on forever and ever and ever. And if you hadn't read that in their notes, I would have had no idea that was the goal, that I'm trying to get to this, trying to survive every disaster every time it shows up, basically.
Another interesting thing that I thought of was, if it's they say weighted roll, I'm guessing there's it's a weighted probability sort of thing between a blessing event, a minor event, or a disaster event. Now, I suppose the problem is with that is that it is essentially random. If, say, your playthrough is essentially random, therefore, one random playthrough, you could get all the blessings in one go, be really, really, powerful, have loads of magic, and then you could hit 3 disaster events in one go and beat all of them.
Yeah. So overall, I think the pacing is maybe a bit unclear.
Yeah.
But because, like you say, mechanically there's some ascendant pacing, they don't necessarily have the final peak, but they do have the sort of multiple peaks, even if they're... So it's kind of tricky. It feels like... Where does that average out to? It feels like that averages out to around a satisfactory to me.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
What were you thinking? Were you thinking...
No, I was thinking about the same, a bit between pass and satisfactory. That was my sort of... there is some ascending pacing, but not... I don't know. There's not so much. But I do see what you mean about the peaks. I don't know. I suppose I would say that, like I was saying before, if the probabilities were weighted in a certain way, or events happened in a certain way, those peaks wouldn't be so peaky, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So they'd only make a lot of difference if, oh my god, I'm halfway through all my resources, and now I've got this disaster event. I really need to, pick the best one. If you get a disaster event straight away and you've got full bars, you go, well, it doesn't really matter which one I pick now because I can recover later.
Yeah, and there, for example, we got the same event twice in a row, which is perhaps an issue of pacing. Aha. So it seems that the best way to get stars is to just let everyone get destroyed by these disasters, and then they learn their lesson. So we'll never see that disaster again because we all got destroyed by it, although we're about to lose from the looks of it. Oh, no.
Oh. Ooh. Oh, nice.
Okay.
So yeah, what do you reckon?
So yeah, I think around a satisfactory. I think that's because there's definitely an attempt to have that sort of pacing with the the multiple disasters and things. You're right. Relying on a sort of randomly generated thing than an authored story sort of undermines that a bit, though.
Mm-hmm.
Techniques. So I guess we have the initial cutscene that sort of sets up the whole premise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then arguably, I guess the rest of it is solely done through these events, right?
Mm.
Again, it's difficult to say that a story is being told, though, because it's just some events are happening, and it's not... I guess it's the lack of persistence, right? It's if there were three horrible fires, back to back, nobody would bat an eye.
Mm.
Okay, so... And again, I guess that also goes on to what I was saying with if the village sort of changed over time as well, that could be a really nice technique to sort of tell that ongoing story.
Yes.
But as it is, so if we count the cutscene as one technique, and I guess we count these events as another, right? Because they are telling us the events that are happening, even if I'm being somewhat pedantic about how I define a story. So.
Yeah.
It feels like that's probably a good, right? Use of more than one game writing technique.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, And last but by no means least is feedback. So what sort of what did they say about the feedback that were given during the lab sessions?
First, to add ways for the narrative to affect the gameplay mechanics. As mentioned above, we added hidden options to all the disaster events. Oh, okay. Unlockable only through previous story progress. Okay. We also want to be careful not to stray in close to branching story with no strategy or game mechanics. To combat this, we made sure every choice of every event has an impact on the resources or weights, so that the player always has agency and impactful decisions. This means that the player's resources are constantly fluctuating, and they must struggle to balance them, providing tactical gameplay.
Is that tactical gameplay? It feels like I said, then it reduces all of the choices to calculations because you're making them based on the numbers rather than so for example, if you had set it up so that it's like you could be a loving god or a warmongering god, right? So you can let your defenses tank to 0 if you're a peaceful god because you're going to make everyone happy and love you and nobody's going to want to fight. Or you can choose to max out your defenses and go on the warpath and conquer and convert all of your neighbours and things like that. Then you're not constrained to pick those things. The numbers might influence your decision, but at that point it becomes a choice because you can decide, I want low defenses or I want high defenses. Whereas currently you kind of have to keep them all high or it's game over. So I get what they were saying, and I do think we sort of we praised them in the end, although it took some deliberation for their network of branches and choices throughout the game, because all of those things definitely do have an impact on every other thing. But then, like we said, the quality of the choices perhaps wasn't as high as it could be. So it sounds like they made a really good attempt, but it didn't quite have the effect that they were hoping for there. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, which makes me think...
Probably...
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say that, so... I don't know, for the feedback then, are we sort of in the past sort of stage? Feedback was addressed but changes had limited success?
I would say maybe at a satisfactory, because, like as I say, the quality and interestingness of the choices perhaps wasn't realised as well as they were hoping, but the sort of branching in the network of choices worked quite well. Yeah. So I think they've been somewhat successful, just not as fully successful as they were hoping for.
Yeah, I see. Yeah.
Okie doke. Yeah, okay. I think I've got a handle on how we win this game. Is we use all of the random events to max our stats as much as possible, and then when a disaster happens, we just let everyone suffer so that they learn their lesson. And now I've said that, that makes me think perhaps we should take a second look at the poetics mark. So maybe it's not us as God that's getting everything we want. If we give the people everything that they want, then they become lazy and don't do well. But it's only if we let them... Oh,
I see what you're saying now. So the villagers in this case are the tortoises.
Yes. And we're the eagle, effectively.
Interesting.
Oh. So I think because we still have the confusion about, like, it's set up that God is giving all of this power to us and it's us that's getting it, makes me think that there's still some confusion about whether the mechanics really are supporting their message. But given that, actually, I think there are some elements of it that do, particularly if that's how they're framing their disasters and how you quote-unquote beat them. So with that in mind, I'll actually bump up the poetics to where would it be? I guess it would average out to a satisfactory, right? Pass, there are some conflicts. Good, some elements of it support it, so that probably averages out as a satisfactory.
Yeah.
Okay. And on that bombshell, so I think so. We talked about their feedback, and we said, yeah, they made some attempts to address it, and some of the changes they've made have been quite effective, but mostly they need to sort of go a little bit further with some of them, I think. Okay, which brings us to the end of this game and to the end of this video. So thank you very much for watching, and we will see you shortly for another video very soon. Bye-bye.